Despite the heavy rain and strong winds, a young boy was clinging to the outside of a tall building. But actually, it was much safer out there than inside that room, because his mother inside had been murdered by thugs. A few minutes earlier, the mother had rushed back to the office in the pouring rain, but she was horrified to see her son there. Sangpill had come running because he missed his mother, only to find himself in her way. The mother quickly wrote down his younger brother's address on a photo and told him to seek help from his uncle if anything happened to her. Then, she urged him to hide. Soon, she was surrounded by a gang of thugs. They interrogated her about the memory card containing the crimes of the big boss. The mother refused to say anything, but Oju, with his sharp eyes, spotted the child's umbrella. He knew the lawyer's son was there, so he threatened the boy's life. If the boy didn't come out, his mother would be in danger. Sangpill, worried about his mother, pushed open the door and ran out. Oju smiled, confident of victory, and hugged Sangpill's head while looking at the female lawyer. To ensure her son's safety, the mother was forced to hand over the memory card, but the thugs had no intention of letting them go. While Oju was asking the person behind it all how to deal with them, Sangpill quickly swallowed the memory card. The mother also took the opportunity to hold off the thugs so her son could escape. As a result, she was fatally stabbed in the stomach. Sangpill, in pain, escaped. Luckily, he met a patrolling police officer, Hyungman, so he rushed to him for help. Unexpectedly, the officer was also on the same side as the thugs. Fortunately, the boy quickly realized the danger and bit Hyungman's hand hard, causing him to lose control of the steering wheel, and the car overturned. Thanks to that, the boy escaped. Knowing that the law couldn't win against money, even though he became a lawyer later in life, he didn't like the law very much. He was speeding recklessly on the road. When the police stopped him, he immediately showed a few wads of cash. The police then led Sangpill to a hidden spot out of the camera's view to receive a bribe. However, Sangpill refused to give them his business card and didn't hand over any money. His car was not only speeding, but also had a rear-end camera. It recorded everything clearly, both the video and audio, of the police demanding a bribe, leaving the officer speechless and defeated. After teaching the corrupt police officer a lesson, Sangpill quickly went to rescue his client. He was an accountant for a gang, but he had been manipulating taxes for personal gain. Unexpectedly, they had discovered his deception and were now being beaten. Suddenly, a car crashed through the door. Sangpill got out of the car with his phone on camera, recording the evidence. He also introduced himself as the lawyer for the accountant being beaten. Thugs settle things with their fists, not with legal documents. So Sangpill's handsome face was punched quite hard. Because his mouth was stained with blood, he had a legitimate reason to retaliate against these people in self-defense. Sangpill smiled and took off his vest. That smile didn't fade when someone dared to threaten him with a knife. Playing with a knife carries a 5-year prison sentence, or at least 2 years, so put the knife down. No sooner had he finished speaking than he subtly snatched the knife from the other man's hand in less than a second. Then, he returned the knife to his opponent. Sangpill then ordered his subordinates to provide concrete evidence of Boss Choi's tax evasion 5 years ago. He would be fined 2 billion won by the tax authorities, but now the accountant only embezzled 800 million won. So Sangpill advised Boss Choi to spare him so he wouldn't lose 2 billion won and go to jail. Boss Choi was a little scared, so he decided to kill anyone who dared to threaten him. Suddenly, a powerful voice rang out. A man in a coat, accompanied by a group of henchmen, walked in under the glare of car lights. Following them were 4 cars carrying women, proving this boss was far more powerful than Boss Choi. Even more significantly, this man was Sangpill's uncle. Therefore, Boss Choi could only remain silent and let the matter slide. Meanwhile, at a domestic violence trial, Jae was defending a wife who had been abused by her husband. However, the judges, who despised women and had accepted bribes from the husband, handed down a harsh sentence to the wife. Jae was furious on behalf of her client. Before she protested, she was just a mother trying to protect her daughter, even suffering broken ribs from her husband's beating. And now, the law couldn't protect the vulnerable? The trial was over, but Jae couldn't rest easy. What did it mean to confront the judge fairly? This man clearly despised women, and even a female lawyer like Jae. He told her she couldn't do anything, so she punched him in the face to prove she wasn't easily intimidated. She was immediately stripped of her license for 6 months. On the day Jae was reprimanded by the Bar Association, the judge she had assaulted also hobbled to the scene on crutches. He thought she would protect him, so he berated Jae. Yet, when she approached him, a mere wave of her hand terrified him. As a result, she went from a suspended lawyer to a dismissed lawyer by the Bar Association. Sangpill wasn't afraid of gangsters because he was very strong. Just after leaving the gym, he received an anonymous package containing black money, but the contents didn't make Sangpill happy. Soon after, news broke that the city mayor had been murdered. The suspect was arrested, but Sangpill suspected he was just a scapegoat. The trial would take place in Sangpill's hometown. The female judge in charge of the case moved Moon-suk held a grudge against him. That night, Sangpill told his uncle that he had decided to return to Ki-sung to open a law office, also to reinvestigate the responsibility related to his mother and Judge Choi. He drove back to his hometown that very night. Coincidentally, Jae-yi had been fired from her job in the city and also decided to return to her hometown to live with her father. Her hometown was Ki-sung, but unlike Sangpill, Judge Choi was Jae-yi's idol. Thus, a train and a car traveled side by side, but their destinies began to intertwine. A normal person would choose a law office in a civilized and respectable place, but Sangpill was different. He targeted the hideout of a gang of loan sharks. He intended to take over this place as his office and conveniently recruit more followers. With an extremely confident and capable expression, Sangpill entered the enemy's territory. However, the people inside were busy preparing for their Hawaii vacation, so it was only after a while that they noticed Sangpill's arrival. Actually, this used to be his mother's law office. His name, engraved on the desk, was still there, but now it had been turned into a money-lending business. So Sangpill gave the thugs time to move out. Seeing someone brazenly trying to take over his place, the gang leader ordered his henchmen to close the door so he could deal with them. Unexpectedly, the person being dealt with was one of his own men. It didn't take much, just the head of Department Tae, Sangpill's right-hand man, handled everything cleanly. Thus, the gang accepted Sangpill as their superior. His law office was opened. Meanwhile, Jae-yi returned to live with her father, but when her father learned of her dismissal, he wasn't surprised at all because he knew her hot-tempered nature all too well. A few days later, the trial of the mayor's murderer took place. Both Jae-yi and Sangpill attended. Jae-yi was a loyal fan of Moon-suk, while Sangpill hated her intensely. But indeed, this woman was a very skillful judge. Her sharp arguments and skillful defense earned her the respect of the mayor's murderer. This greatly impressed Jae-yi, a female lawyer who had previously been unable to voice her opinions. She was in a good mood and wouldn't resort to violence. However, upon returning home, she found a gang of thugs vandalizing her father's photo studio. It turned out he owed them money for a long time. Seeing the small amount borrowed but the high interest, Jae-yi became furious. She immediately went to confront their boss, Sangpill, who had recently taken office and was unaware of the situation. However, he calmly handled the matter. She accused him of running an illegal agency and engaging in usury. He immediately sued her for intimidation and loan default. Both were familiar with the law, neither willing to back down. Everything would have been peaceful if Sangpill hadn't touched upon Jae-yi's painful experience of being fired. As a result, she punched him in the mouth and was immediately detained by the police for 24 hours. Sangpill, however, wouldn't let the matter rest. He scolded the thugs, saying they were all poor and yet they were doing such wicked things. He warned them that now that they were under his wing, they didn't need to do such heartless things anymore. The next day, he went to the police station to find Jae-yi and offer her a job as a manager at his law office. Jae-yi was unemployed, so she agreed. Surprisingly, she was released a day early, even though she hadn't paid bail. While drinking with her father, she learned that he had asked Moon-suk to help her. Moon-suk had sent Yeon-hee, the person Jae-yi hated most, to bail her out, so she couldn't be happy. Despite her bad mood, she still had to go to Sangpill's office the next day to work and pay off her father's debts. Sangpill was quite generous to his new hire. He took her on her first mission, robbing a client, a prisoner, about to be sentenced. Sangpill showed Jae-yi the case file. Only then did she realize that this prisoner was the convicted murderer of the mayor. Why would Sangpill want to reopen the case and argue his case in court? He'd also be stealing the client from the best lawyer in Kaesung. Was that even a good idea? The prisoner stepped out. Unexpectedly, it was Hung Man, whom Sangpill had bitten years ago. The bite mark on his hand was still there. Sangpill tried to persuade Hung Man to change his defense lawyer. He wanted Hung Man to be released from prison, but his current lawyer was Go-hun, the best lawyer in Kaesung, and there was no reason for him to change. Go-hun was on the same side as Oh-ju, the man who killed Sangpill's mother. Oh-ju was also the superior of Boss Choi, whose tax-evading accountant Sangpill had stolen. They both worked for Moon-suk. Clearly, the mayor's murder case was not simple. Jae-yi couldn't bear to look at Sangpill, so she wanted to leave immediately. In the car, she asked him why he kept getting involved in this case, wondering if he wanted to overthrow someone, but he didn't want her to know too much, so he bought her some food. Then he made up an excuse, saying that Hung Man was well known in Kaesung, so if they could save him, a new lawyer like Sangpill would enhance his reputation and gain more clients. As an upright female lawyer, Jae-yi was extremely annoyed by this. She returned the half-eaten sandwich to him and left. The mayor had just been murdered, so Moon-suk wanted Oh-ju to take over the position. He was overjoyed and knelt down to thank her. He said that no matter what happened, he would be loyal to her. Indeed, power can make people utterly despicable. Unexpectedly, Moon-suk seemed very close to Jae-yi. When she had free time, she even took Jae-yi shopping with her. Kaesung was where Jae-yi grew up, so she had been in contact contact with Moon-suk from an early age. From then on, Jae admired her. Because she idolized her, Jae became a lawyer so she could enforce the law like her. While the two were chatting happily, Moon-suk's secretary, Soon-ja, arrived. Soon-ja held a grudge against Jae because years ago, the teacher had given her child a low grade, so she stormed into the classroom wanting to hit the teacher. Jae was also present. Unable to restrain herself, she spoke up to defend the teacher, humiliating Soon-ja, and thus, they became enemies. Jae was upset, but upon returning to the office and meeting some humorous colleagues, she cheered up somewhat. Sangpill took Jae to photograph the scene where the mayor was murdered. Suddenly, another prosecutor in charge of the case arrived and chased them away. Jae's enemy, prosecutor Yeon-hee, was also present. Yeon-hee even mocked Jae, calling her incompetent and useless, saying she had been fired. Yeon-hee told Sangpill that if he wanted a manager, she could introduce him to someone better, so Jae wouldn't have to bother. Sangpill refuted and defended Jae. Since he had chosen this person, the organization had to be more special than usual. That organization wasn't something an ordinary prosecutor could figure out. After saying this, he left. Unable to investigate the crime scene, Sangpill went to lawyer Go-hun and openly stole his client. Go-hun simply told Sangpill to withdraw from the case and left. This showed that Go-hun only considered Sangpill a small lawyer trying to make a living in this area. Unexpectedly, he had his subordinates use a drone to record Go-hun's entire conversation with Oh-ju. As Sangpill predicted, Daeyeon wasn't the real culprit. They promised to exonerate him so he would willingly remain silent and become a suspect. His trial had entered its preliminary stage. A series of unfavorable evidence pointed towards Daeyeon, but his trusted lawyer chose to remain silent and offer no defense. Daeyeon was extremely worried, yet after the trial, the lawyer was blamed by Moon-suk, not because she was on the right side, but because the lawyer was too obvious, not offering a single defense, giving the police an excuse to replace him. Convicting him would then be very complicated, so Go-hun bowed his head and apologized. This shows that outwardly she is just a regional judge, but inwardly she holds significant political power, manipulating everything from behind the scenes. At this time, Sangpill approached Hungman, showing him the video of Go-hun's conversation. Knowing he was taking the blame and wouldn't be saved, the old man was extremely worried, but he also understood that this young lawyer's insistence on helping him surely had a larger agenda, so he refused. At this point, Jae began to share Sangpill's opinion that Hungman wasn't the real culprit, but no matter how she thought about it, she couldn't find any suspicious points. The more she thought, the more vague memories came to mind, and she kept thinking about her mother. That fateful day, it was raining heavily. Jae wanted to buy a trumpet for her performance the next day, but her mother wouldn't let her. She told Jae to stay home while she went alone, but an hour later, and then again, her mother disappeared without a trace. To this day, her mother still hasn't returned. What exactly happened to her? In prison, the old policeman's life wasn't good. Fellow inmates were constantly plotting to kill him. The next day, Sangpill came to see him again. This time, Hungman, having lost all patience with Sangpill, angrily demanded to know what he wanted from him. Sangpill no longer wanted to hide and slowly revealed that he was the boy Sangpill had deceived years ago. After learning Sangpill's identity, Hungman involuntarily trembled and recoiled. He also stated that his purpose in wanting to get Sangpill out of prison was to take revenge himself. He couldn't let his enemy die at the hands of another. Hungman faced a choice between a lifetime in prison, possibly even being slandered, and the freedom to see his seriously ill wife before facing revenge. He chose the latter. He agreed to switch lawyers to Sangpill. Yet after achieving the first step of his plan, Sangpill drank and cried in the rain. He hated evil, hated all those who abused power, hated the thugs who killed without blinking an eye, and now he was gradually following that path. If Uncle Dae hadn't brought an umbrella to take him home, Sangpill would probably have sat in the rain all night. After careful consideration, Sangpill refused Uncle Dae's help. He would use the law to punish the villains, just as he had punished his mother. The third trial took place, but Sangpill couldn't find Jae. A few minutes earlier, she had been kidnapped by Boss Choi. They thought she was important to Sangpill. Standing outside the courthouse, Sangpill anxiously called her, but a male voice answered. Boss Choi told Sangpill to leave the courtroom quickly to save his girlfriend, but Sangpill calmly said she wasn't his girlfriend, so there was no need to save her. Boss Choi looked at Jae, expecting her to be heartbroken, but instead, he felt nauseated. She was angry that he thought she was Sangpill's girlfriend. However, not long after, Sangpill called back, warning Boss Choi not to touch a single hair on Jae's head if he didn't want to die. Sangpill would be there soon. Before leaving, he instructed his subordinates to create chaos to delay the trial for a few hours. While his subordinates caused a disturbance in the courtroom, Sangpill wasn't idle either. He single-handedly fought off a group of thugs who kept charging at him as if they didn't feel any pain. Sangpill took them all down. At the last minute, just as Sangpill was about to untie Jae, Boss Choi smashed a bottle over over his head. Luckily, Jae had thrown a drunken bludgeon at him, giving Sangpill time to counterattack and take him down. The two quickly left the place and returned to the courthouse as fast as possible. In the car, Jae noticed Sangpill's wound and awkwardly helped him stop the bleeding. This was the first time she had shown him such concern, and he was truly happy. In truth, he had been interested in her for a long time. He had attended every one of her trials to cheer her on. He had even ordered his subordinates to demand money from her father to pressure her into working for him. He simply wanted to be by Jae's side. The real reason was that years ago, the woman who held back the police officer, allowing Sangpill to escape, was Jae's mother. They were connected, and Sangpill had discovered that the mastermind behind it all was Moon Suk. Therefore, in this battle, the two had to do their best to seek justice for themselves and their families who had been harmed. His subordinates even prepared a fire extinguisher to create a dramatic moment for their boss's appearance. From the white smoke, Sangpill and Jae officially returned to the game. The trial had just begun, and Sangpill didn't rush to defend himself. Instead, he attacked the judge next to Moon Suk, calling him morally corrupt. Then, Sangpill presented a video he had secretly filmed of a girl's skirt as evidence. Although this was unrelated to the trial, a member of the jury with poor morals would inevitably be disqualified. Moon Suk agreed to remove her people from the judge's seat after today. Yeon Hee, whom Moon Suk had groomed, was no pushover either. She accused the troublemakers of being employees of Sangpill's law office. She accused him of inciting others to disrupt court proceedings. As a result, Sangpill was handcuffed and taken away. But this made him happy, because being imprisoned meant he would have more time to see Hyungman. He and his subordinates were incredibly cheerful in prison. At mealtime, he went to meet the regional finance director. The director had been arrested to avoid the risk of being reported in the press. After a period of peace, he would go out and enjoy himself again. The regional intelligence network depended on him, which is why Sangpill had to go and get acquainted with him. But he paid no attention to this inconsiderate man. Because of his suspicious nature and unwillingness to let anyone pry information from his experience, he left. Sangpill didn't try to stop him. If plan A failed, he would have another plan ready. In another scene, Oju, upon learning that his subordinates couldn't deal with Sangpill, was extremely disappointed and stabbed Boss Choi in the thigh. Oju warned that if Boss Choi failed again, the knife would be plunged into his heart next time. Immediately afterward, he received an anonymous package. Inside were images of his past crimes along with a warning stone. Clearly, someone knew he was about to become mayor and wanted to challenge him. At the same time, Jae visited Sangpill in prison. Through the glass door, Sangpill could clearly see his feelings for her. Sangpill greatly admired honest lawyers like Jae. She's like his mother. She's willing to face anything for justice. And it's not just a recent crush, he's had it for a long time. On her graduation day, he secretly had someone deliver flowers to her. Initially, it was because her mother saved his life, but gradually, that gratitude turned into affection for Jae, a strong and resilient girl. Returning to the present, Sangpill confidently handed the entire case over to Jae to handle. She could do whatever she wanted. This encouragement lifted Jae's spirits. She went to the hospital to find Hyungman's wife and coincidentally met Oju leaving. Her father had said that Hyungman loved his wife very much, willing to stay by her side and care for her sick wife without complaint. Even if he had been a bad person before, he wouldn't have committed murder. When Hyungman's wife learned that Jae was defending her husband, she desperately begged for his help. She believed her husband was innocent. Jae felt great sympathy for the unfortunate, and the more she sympathized, the more she didn't know how to comfort them. At that moment, Sangpill approached the finance director again and said that he had sued himself to go to prison and save his life. But it seemed this move was a bit wrong, because there were no shortage of enemies of his in prison. He might even die sooner. This statement left the director speechless with fear. Sangpill's prediction was correct. Soon after, a group of people ganged up on the director, making Sangpill extremely happy. He immediately sent his men to rescue him. After being rescued, the director compromised and revealed what he knew. Oju had a dream of reforming the city. He wanted to build a place called Logan City, but the mayor opposed it. So he ordered his henchmen to kill people and then tried to frame Hyungman. Sangpill only needed this information to devise a new direction for his case. Jae also approached Hyungman and mentioned his frail wife, who was waiting for his release from prison. She warned him that if he didn't cooperate, he wouldn't get to see her one last time. So he placed all his trust in Jae. He told her that he was with the internet cafe owner on the day the mayor was murdered, which he claimed was his alibi. Without hesitation, Jae went to the internet cafe to confront the owner. However, he refused to cooperate. Because Hyungman had previously abused his power and oppressed him, he didn't care if Hyungman was wrongly accused. Seeing Jae's persistence, he even forcefully pushed her out. But she didn't give up. A short while later, Jae brought Hyungman's sick wife into the internet cafe Tae to gain the owner's sympathy. The wife sincerely apologized on her husband's behalf and earnestly begged the owner to save him. The owner felt a little guilty for being a witness, but failing to save Hung Man. When Hung Man's wife knelt down, the owner's heart softened and he agreed to be a witness. After gathering enough crucial clues, the day arrived when Sangpill and his gang were released on bail. However, just as they stepped out into the world of freedom, they narrowly avoided being hit by a car. Jae specifically came to pick them up. Soon, the final trial took place. Oh-ju personally attended to witness the outcome. In court, Sangpill presented evidence proving that Hung Man was not present at the crime scene, but prosecutor Yeon-hee repeatedly refuted this, claiming Sangpill threatened or bribed the witness. Her actions tarnished the lawyer's reputation, forcing Moon-suk to adjourn the trial to verify the authenticity of the photograph. Hearing this, Oh-ju left the trial, finding it too boring. He was certain the police officer would take his place. But little did he know that Sangpill's gang member, disguised as a janitor, had run over his assistant. In just a few short seconds, a tracking chip had been attached to the man's clothing. After the trial ended, Sangpill and Jae simply followed the tracking device to find where Assistant Oh had stopped. Sangpill's men, hidden high above, were filming his actions live with cameras. He wanted to find an intermediary to help him cross the border illegally. So, as soon as Assistant Oh left, Sangpill and his men, armed with batons, went looking for the intermediary. He had his men hang the man upside down from the balcony and force him to confess everything he had just told Assistant Oh. The man confessed that Oh-ju wanted him to bring someone to China that day, but they only showed him a photo, not specific information. Sangpill looked at the photo thoughtfully. Suddenly, a man identical to the one in the photo appeared downstairs. The man, startled, immediately ran away. Sang quickly chased after the suspect. Seeing this, Jae also drove after them. They ran from the pedestrian underpass to the train tracks, neither giving up. The two men fought fiercely. Just as Sangpill managed to grab the suspect by the neck and force him to confess to murdering the mayor, a high-speed train sped towards them, forcing Sangpill to release his grip and step aside. The train sped along for a long time, but it left Sangpill speechless as the suspect held a knife to Jae's neck. This had pushed Sangpill to his limit. The lights flickered for a few seconds, then Sangpill appeared right in front of him, clutching the sharp knife. He then punched the suspect repeatedly like an uncontrolled beast. If Jae hadn't intervened, the man would have likely lost his life. At this point, he was forced to admit that Oh-ju had ordered him to kill the man. But he was also forced to keep the secret, so he had no choice but to jump onto the tracks to prevent his loved ones from being murdered. No matter how strong Jae was, she was still just a girl. Faced with this situation, her whole body went limp, and she fainted from panic. Therefore, Sangpill had to take her to the hospital. After a few hours, she finally calmed down, but the situation didn't allow them any rest. As soon as Jae woke up, the prosecutor arrived and took both of them to the station for questioning regarding the man who jumped onto the railway tracks. Clearly, this man was one of Moon-suk's men. The prosecutor repeatedly asked if Sangpill had pushed the victim onto the tracks. Hearing this, Jae was very annoyed. There was no arrest warrant, so they didn't need to be there. As soon as Jae left the interrogation room, she encountered Yeon-hee. Yeon-hee asked about the victim's phone, as the police investigation hadn't found it at the scene. Later, Jae came face to face with Oh-ju. Jae didn't want to get involved with him, but Sangpill ignored her warnings and approached him to talk. Jae didn't know how hard Sangpill had to remain calm when standing before the man who murdered his mother. Oh-ju said Sangpill looked familiar. He also said he was from this area, but didn't reveal his identity. Seeing Sangpill's hateful eyes, Jae felt a sense of unease. That evening, Sangpill drove Jae home and even invited her father in for tea. Seizing the opportunity, he readily agreed. Jae's father inquired about Sangpill's parents' health, which caused him a pang of sadness. He said he lost his mother at a young age, but was incredibly proud to have a mother who was an upright and honest lawyer. This resonated with Jae, evoking an indescribable feeling of empathy. She also began to see Sangpill in a different light after hearing him praise his mother. After returning to the office, Sangpill gave the phone to Chief Tae, telling him to unlock it. It turned out he had actually stolen the suspect's phone. However, Chief Tae only knew how to fight. He didn't know how to pick locks, so they went to the morgue to borrow the suspect's fingerprints to unlock his phone. That night, Jae couldn't sleep, so she went to find Sangpill to discuss the case. Unexpectedly, she overheard his conversation with Uncle Dae. Moon-suk, whom she respected, was preparing to make the despicable Oh-ju the mayor of this area. The door creaked open. Seeing Jae arrive, Uncle Dae left after a few questions. Jae desperately wanted to know the truth behind it all, but Sangpill thought it wasn't the right time yet. While sitting in the office, Jae noticed a strange phone in Sangpill's hand. She couldn't help but remember Yeon-hee demanding the victim's phone that morning. Meanwhile, a fishmonger, knowing Oh-ju and Hung Man's friendship, came to say that on the day the mayor was murdered, he saw someone nearby. This person was definitely not Hungman, but someone else, because this person didn't limp like Hungman. The fishmonger thought Oju would save his friend, so he wanted some money. But unexpectedly, he kicked the fishmonger, sending him tumbling down a high floor to silence him. Oju's thuggish demeanor made Moon-suk begin to dislike him. But even when Moon-suk scolded him, Oju still smiled and said he had given everyone there a suitcase full of fish, because the market he managed was surely overflowing with money. Oju personally helped Moon-suk load the money into the safe. This amount was enough for her to live comfortably for the rest of her life. But for these people, greed is insatiable. Oju still harbored dreams of the Logan City project, bringing him even more money. But in Moon-suk's eyes, this dream was just a childish fantasy. Her face clearly showed contempt. A few days later, a closed-door meeting between the judges and lawyers took place. Moon-suk brazenly rejected the evidence Sangpill provided. She even declared the video to be fake. Since everyone present was in cahoots, Sangpill knew arguing would be pointless, so he only promised that he would have evidence at the next trial to silence them, and quietly left. After spending some time with her, Sangpill realized that Yeon-hee was competitive but also fought for what was right, only being deceived by Moon-suk. That's why he told her that Oju was the mayor's killer. He also revealed that Oju was about to become the new mayor thanks to Moon-suk's support. Knowing she wouldn't believe him, Sangpill thought this psychological attack would be enough. As he was leaving, Sangpill wanted to call Jae to ask if she was still at the office, but he was shocked to learn she had gone to the prison to visit Hungman. When Sangpill arrived, Hungman was recounting how terrible Moon-suk was, but Sangpill quickly interrupted him. He didn't know Jae was unaware of the truth. Sangpill pulled her outside, facing Jae's suspicious gaze. He had to shatter her illusions about Moon-suk. She wasn't a kind and talented judge at all, but a real devil. Before Jae could even believe it, an investigator approached and greeted her. It turned out he was the police officer who had been investigating her mother's disappearance years ago. She gave him her business card. He was a very dedicated officer who was still investigating the case. After talking, the two went for a walk together. Jae looked seriously into Sangpill's eyes and said that she considered Moon-suk like her own mother, so if he wanted her to think badly of her just because of some misunderstanding or conflict on his part, he should have more convincing evidence. On the other hand, the police found the fishmonger's body. The investigator wanted to investigate further, but the other police officers saw him as just a poor man and concluded that the victim had acted rashly. Further investigation would only waste money and effort. Meanwhile, Oju remembered the female lawyer he had killed years ago. He also realized that Sangpill was the child who swallowed the chip, so Hungman had tricked him. He hadn't dealt with the boy yet, allowing him to grow up and seek revenge. The conflict over Moon-suk kept them awake all night. How could he convince her that he was telling the truth? The next morning, Sangpill and Chief Tae wanted to investigate the strange number on the phone of the man who had questioned them on the line, but Jae stopped them. She wanted to go with them too. Sangpill didn't want her to go, fearing she might be in danger, but she was determined, so no one could stop her. They arrived at the location and met the owner of the phone number. He was the middleman who hired a hitman to kill Oju. Seeing him get into his car and try to leave, Sangpill's men rushed forward and banged on the car door to stop him. Frightened, he sped away, and Sangpill chased after him closely. They weaved through all kinds of narrow alleyways. Sangpill's car, unfortunately, went against the traffic and crashed into another car, but he didn't stop, instead accelerating and continuing the chase. When they entered a one-way alley, Oju's car collided with a truck going in the opposite direction. Sangpill still pressed the gas pedal, cornering Oju's car and then accelerating to the maximum, forcing both cars to reverse, making Oju swerve to save his life. Meanwhile, a memorial service was being held for the great local judge, Moon-suk's father. After her moving and eloquent speech, Oju boldly took the microphone and called for support, enraging Moon-suk, but she couldn't physically attack him in front of the crowd. Just when it seemed the matter was settled, Sangpill triumphantly entered, accompanied by his intermediary. He ascended the platform and loudly declared to the people that this man was the broker who hired the assassin to kill the former mayor. The crowd began to murmur and whisper. Seeing the situation was escalating, Moon-suk and Oju retreated. Sangpill, undeterred, followed them up. Jae tried to stop him, but his icy, sharp eyes intimidated her. Only someone consumed by hatred could possess such eyes. Above, Moon-suk was fiercely attacking Oju for daring to disrupt her father's ceremony. The tall, powerful man could only stand before her, his hands clasped in humiliation. After Moon-suk calmed down, he dared to say that Sangpill was the son of the female lawyer who held the old male chip. Moon-suk was slightly startled. She let Oju leave first while she quietly thought about how to deal with the situation in the courtroom. Suddenly, Sangpill appeared right behind her. When he confronted her, she denied it. Only after confirming there was no recording device did she gradually reveal her true nature. All of this was overheard by Jae. The woman she considered her mother had killed someone else's mother. Moon-suk left, but ran into Jae. She didn't want to explain much. This was a shock to Jae. She couldn't be happy all day. She remembered how years ago she had desperately searched everywhere for her mother with a note, and Moon-suk had gently come to hug her and comfort her, promising to find her mother. A child deprived of a mother's warmth had come to trust, respect, and adore this woman. However, Jae's father now mistakenly believes Sangpill to be uneducated and wicked. He intends to sell the photography studio to pay off Sangpill's debts. He doesn't want his daughter to work for someone like that anymore. Jae doesn't know how to broach the subject. She fears her father will be utterly disappointed in Moon-suk, just like she was, so she only holds his hand to comfort him and calm his anger. The next day, Jae still carries a glimmer of hope as she goes to see Moon-suk. She wants to know if she has any troubles. Moon-suk agrees to talk with Jae. This woman begins with hypocritical arguments, just like the mask of righteousness she wears. She asks Jae if she thinks using the law to punish others is a prerogative of judges. To her, it's a punishment because the number of people who hate her increases with the number of people she judges. Then she says Sangpill is one of those enemies, which is why he falsely accused her. Her sadness truly makes Jae waver. Moon-suk also gave her a business card from another detective agency to get a job with. Meanwhile, Sangpill was walking down the street when he saw a newspaper praising Oju's simple and friendly nature. He wasn't just a scoundrel, but also a very good marketer. He had someone film him eating at a restaurant and was attracting many supporters. Just as they were painting a bright future ahead, Sangpill burst through the door, shattering their illusions. Sangpill showed the assassin's phone, but the assassin calmly smiled, convinced it was just an empty phone, and ordered his henchmen to throw it away. Jae was truly convinced by Moon-suk's words. When Sangpill drove up to greet her, she deliberately ignored him and walked away. But Sangpill stopped her and told her about the new details of the case. Now she had two conflicting thoughts. Was he determined to win the case for revenge, or was it truly for the benefit of the community? The next court session for the mayor's murder case quickly arrived. Jae still chose to accompany Sangpill to the courtroom to fight. But unexpectedly, the hitman's broker sat in the witness chair instead of the defendant. Hungman worried that the broker might frame him, but Sangpill's expression clearly showed he had prepared himself. Whatever happened, he would adapt accordingly. The broker had clearly been threatened or bribed, as he constantly objected to Sangpill's incriminating questions. Some of Sangpill's questions were even challenged by the prosecutor. Moon-suk also warned Sangpill to ask seriously and not use harsh language, but Sangpill didn't want to be serious. He didn't need the answers either. This confident demeanor was definitely a result of preparation. Sure enough, outside, Sangpill's mother was brought in by his men. This was to show her the bad things he had done, making the broker afraid. He was afraid of disappointing his kind, mute mother. Sangpill sensed this and had someone escort her out. Overwhelmed by guilt, he couldn't bear it any longer and blurted out Oju's name. Moon-suk didn't expect to lose this game. As the judge presiding over the trial, she could have manipulated everything to her liking, but she forgot that there's one thing money can't control: human remorse. Oju's name being called in court caused his approval rating to plummet. All his previous efforts to build his image were wasted. Yeon-hee didn't realize that all the evidence she believed was actually fake, so she started paying more attention to the information Sangpill provided. He also told her that Oju's secretary had fled abroad, and her investigation team had kept this a secret. This made her begin to suspect those on her side. As for Jae, she didn't know what the vague pieces of the past meant. What was the relationship between Sangpill and Moon-suk? So she decided to investigate it herself. First, she went to find Hyungman and confirmed that Moon-suk was the one behind Oju. Then she went to the old bookstore and asked the owner if he knew of any shocking events that had happened there in the past. He said there was once a talented female lawyer who, after some unfortunate incident, did something reckless. Her young son also disappeared. Afterward, Jae returned to the office and questioned Chief Tae about Sangpill's past. However, Chief Tae didn't reveal anything. Jae then turned to Sangpill's subordinate. Being straightforward and honest, he confessed. One fine day, Sangpill appeared wanting to reclaim the office because it had once belonged to him. He wanted to say something more, but Chief Tae stopped him in time. However, the more Sangpill tried to hide it, the more his curiosity was piqued. She searched online for the female lawyer who had done something reckless, as the bookstore owner had mentioned. Jae realized that the day she died was also the day her mother disappeared. This was clearly not normal. If it really involved her mother, she absolutely had to investigate. Chief Tae, seeing the search history, felt that the truth was about to be revealed, so he immediately called Sangpill. But Sangpill couldn't answer because he was talking to Jae's father. Due to a misunderstanding, the father sternly said he didn't want Sangpill near or forcing his son want to work with him anymore. Faced with this anger, Sangpill didn't know how to explain, so he could only leave reluctantly. Meanwhile, Jae went to the police station again to ask for more information from the investigators. After hearing her question about lawyer Choi, the father gave her a copy of the documents she had left behind. He also said he was sure there was something hidden in this matter. Because lawyer Choi loved her son, she certainly wouldn't abandon him. The more Jae thought about lawyer Choi's son, the more she thought of Sangpill. So she went to see his uncle. At this point, she didn't know they were uncle and nephew. She only thought Sangpill was one of Uncle Dae's most capable subordinates, so she asked why he had left the city to return to Kisum. As a veteran of the underworld who had been through countless things, Uncle Dae knew one truth: the more you try to hide something, the further it gets. So he told Jae that lawyer Choi was his sister and Sangpill's biological mother. Sangpill returned to Kisum to gamble everything, both for revenge and to eradicate evil. The truth came as a shock, and Jae couldn't imagine how horrific the story behind it all was. Meanwhile, Sangpill visited Hungman in prison again, but this time, Hungman refused to see him. This was because Oju had previously dealt a psychological blow to Hungman's weak heart. Oju showed him a cleverly edited video framed to frame him. If Hungman didn't obey, he would face life imprisonment for murdering the mayor. If he behaved well, he would be released from prison safely. Immediately after Oju left, Hungman's wife called and said Oju had paid all her hospital bills. Threatened and indebted, Hungman didn't dare meet Sangpill. That night, Oju went to Sangpill's office again, bringing up his mother's death. Oju spoke sarcastically, hinting at the pain Sangpill had kept hidden in his heart. In a fit of anger, Sangpill grabbed Oju by the collar, but seeing her face, Sangpill let go. Sangpill would let the law, which he always despised, punish him. That was also his mother's wish. As soon as he left Sangpill's place, Oju went to Moon-suk's house to flatter her. He had been so arrogant and despicable just moments before, but now he was equally vile. That night, Sangpill, with a heavy heart, went out to enjoy the sea breeze. When he returned to the office, Jae was already waiting. Sangpill was slightly surprised, but tried to hide his unease, telling her she didn't need to work overtime and should go home. Jae was unusually calm. She went to the statue of the goddess of justice and gently turned it. A series of images of her from the past years appeared before her eyes. She asked why he was investigating her. On the day his mother died, her mother also disappeared. She said she deserved to know the truth, so he should tell her. Since she had investigated this far, Sangpill couldn't hide it anymore. He told her everything. Whether she believed it or not was up to her. Looking at the images on the screen, it was clear they had been investigated for a long time, not something fabricated for her to discover. Jae couldn't believe the truth. For so long, she had foolishly called the person involved in her mother's disappearance mother. She had even admired and revered Moon-suk like a saint. Her complex emotions made Jae lose her composure. Sangpill patiently followed and comforted her. It took a while before she calmed down. They sat by the beach, drinking and watching fireworks. Late at night, he even personally carried her back to the office. It was always like that. Whenever she was tired and overwhelmed, there was always a shoulder and arms ready to support her. Seeing the small girl before him, exhausted and devastated by the truth, was the reason he wanted to keep everything a secret from her. The next day, Jae woke up feeling much better. Meanwhile, Uncle Dae had tucked Sangpill into his chair, letting him sleep soundly. He was probably staying up to watch over her. He was afraid she would wake up in the middle of the night crying, and there would be no one to wipe away her tears. Even Chief Tae, seeing Sangpill's listless eyes, was worried about his health. Prosecutor Yeon-hee, affected by Sangpill's words, began to suspect her subordinate. She was working hard on this case for justice, not for money. Therefore, she feared that the justice she was defending was a terrifying mask of power. Yeon-hee was the daughter of the secretary who worked diligently for Moon-suk. Despite Oju's best efforts, his vote count was only second. The mayoral election was approaching, yet he still mockingly said that he wasn't worried because he had prosecutor Yeon-hee. Hearing her daughter's name uttered by Oju's filthy mouth, the secretary was furious, vowing that he shouldn't even think about having any intentions towards her daughter. Despite her wicked deeds, she was incredibly proud of her righteous and capable daughter. Therefore, she wouldn't allow anyone to tarnish her, not even herself. Sangpill still hadn't told Jae that her mother had clashed with Hungman to save him. He had fled, so he didn't know if her mother was alright. Currently, Jae was flipping through old photo albums, looking at every location her mother had photographed. She wondered why her mother would risk her life photographing such desolate places. Unexpectedly, Oju appeared nearby. He was campaigning. His expression was clearly malicious, but his words tried to portray himself as a highly educated and noble man worthy of being mayor, which Jae couldn't bear to listen to anymore. She wished she could quickly have him thrown in jail. With mixed feelings, she strolled along the beach and encountered Sangpill. He seemed to appear almost every time she needed him most. Jae asked asked him how he knew her mother. For years, she had held on to the hope that her mother was still alive, so he couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth. But perhaps now it was impossible to hide it any longer. He said that her mother had saved him. Jae then went to the prison to find Hung Man and told him she was the daughter of the woman who had held him captive all those years ago. She asked him what he had done to her mother. He trembled, repeatedly apologizing, but Jae would never forgive such a wicked person. She sadly returned to her office and hugged Sangpill. She felt he must be exhausted from carrying so many painful secrets for so many years. Two people sharing the same pain developed a deep empathy, creating a bond that brought them together. After confirming their feelings for each other, they felt more comfortable together each time they went out. They were strolling along the beach when Sangpill received a call from Oju. But on the other end of the line was Hung Man. It turned out Oju had come to the jail again today to pressure Hung Man into confessing, but this time he decided not to compromise. Hung Man asked Sangpill if he could clear his name. Sangpill answered without hesitation that he would get Hung Man out safely. Hung Man looked Oju straight in the face and told him to get out. Then Hung Man left, leaving Oju furious but powerless. Just as he left, Sangpill and Jae arrived. The police informed them that Oju had fabricated the crime scene video evidence with incredible skill. Earlier, Sangpill's team also discovered a truck at the crime scene. It's highly likely that the truck's dashcam recorded something. They need to find this truck quickly before the next trial. The case is becoming increasingly difficult, so Sangpill decided to hire someone for his office, the younger sister of the second boss. She fell head over heels for Sangpill at first sight and immediately agreed to work for him. Meanwhile, Jae's father, unaware of the situation, was still trying to support Oju's campaign. Unable to bear it any longer, she told him the truth about Oju being a bad person. However, her father seemed too busy to believe her and left immediately. Helpless, Jae returned to her office. She remembered the truck Sangpill mentioned. The day before, the investigator had also told a colleague about the fish vendor who was questioning himself by the beach. So, Sangpill and Jae went to find the investigator to ask about this. The case had to be closed. Thankfully, the investigator still had the address of the company that owned the car, so Jae immediately went to find the owner to ask for the car's black box. At the same time, the next trial was about to begin. Both Sangpill and Jae were racing against time. The manager was uncooperative, but Jae remembered that he had borrowed money from her and hadn't repaid it, so she threatened to call his wife. He had no choice but to hand over the cameras. But the workshop had many cars, so they had to find each one individually. In court, Sangpill was trying his best to stall for time, but Moon-suk saw through his trick and urged him not to talk nonsense anymore. Sangpill had no choice but to request that Oju appear in court to give testimony because the defendant was accusing him. There were people watching the trial, so Moon-suk couldn't be biased. She decided to take a 10-minute break for the jury to convene. 10 minutes later, the trial resumed. Fortunately, this time Jae successfully retrieved the video. The witness at this point was Prosecutor Jun, a subordinate of Prosecutor Yeon-hee. He was also on Oju's side. All the evidence in the case was found by him. He claimed to have gone to the scene where the former mayor was murdered after receiving a call reporting the crime. But Sangpill refuted this, presenting the black box video from the truck. After watching the video, Prosecutor Yeon-hee couldn't believe that her trusted subordinate was fabricating evidence at the scene. At this point, Prosecutor Yeon-hee had to personally announce that the prosecution was dropping all charges against Hung Man. As the judge, Moon-suk could only declare him innocent. After many months in prison, he was finally released. Upon his release, he immediately rushed to the hospital to visit his wife. Her condition had worsened, but she still tried to wait for her husband's visit. When they met, she urged him to do the right thing from now on to atone for his past crimes. He promised he would. Hearing these words, she finally passed away peacefully. That night, Hyung-man called a woman in Thailand. Unexpectedly, it was Jae's mother. She was still alive. Hearing her daughter's name, she burst into tears. Because her subordinates fabricated evidence, all responsibility fell on Prosecutor Yeon-hee's shoulders. She faced the risk of having her license revoked. Faced with such turmoil, people are easily swayed. Sure enough, Prosecutor Yeon-hee sought help from Moon-suk. Knowing this, Moon-suk immediately pulled Yeon-hee to her side. She had Yeon-hee join a secret 7-person group, including Prosecutor Jun. With Moon-suk's backing, Oju was promoted to mayor. That day, he held a large press conference to celebrate his new mayoral position. Sangpill realized that the reason a meticulous person like Moon-suk would give the mayoral position to Oju was because she wanted to manipulate the city through a scheme. The previous mayor was also her loyal dog, but he had his own opinions. But Oju is different. He's practically a loyal dog, so Moon-suk will be easier to control. Right now, if they want to attack that group, they have to start with Hung Man, who has a long-standing relationship with Oju. If they don't protect him now, Oju might might kill him. He's currently submitting his resignation to his superiors. Before leaving, he secretly took a key from under the desk. At the same time, the TV is showing Oju taking office as mayor. Hyungman is resentful and says he will personally drag Oju back to the bottom of society where he rightfully belongs. Just as Sangpill predicted, as soon as Hyungman left the police station and drove home, he was followed closely by Oju's henchmen. They were planning some evil scheme, but Sangpill's car blocked their way. At all costs, he had to protect Hyungman's life until he captured Oju. As soon as they saw his face, they turned around and drove away in disgust. Because they blocked his way, Sangpill and Jae lost track of Hyungman. Luckily, Sangpill had already installed a GPS tracker on Hyungman's phone, so he immediately called home and instructed his subordinates to track his location. While driving, Hyungman reminisced about the past. He had spared Jae's mother's life, but he had used the lives of her husband and child to force her to leave Korea. He feared that if Oju found out he hadn't handled things properly, he would lose his life. Now, after decades, that woman had returned to her homeland. Hyungman went to a suburban parking lot and used his key to unlock another car, taking out a black box. Inside were a gun, a few bullets, and a picture of the accident from years ago. A short while later, Sangpill and Jae arrived. They couldn't see Hyungman from a distance. Hyungman was standing high above, observing them. He called Jae, saying the documents in the trunk were incredibly helpful in overthrowing Oju. He then added that he owed her nothing. That night, at the restaurant, Hyungman confronted Oju. He asked the owner to leave, then pulled a gun from his pocket and pointed it directly at Oju's forehead. Their decades-long friendship was nothing more than a master-servant relationship of mutual exploitation. But Hyungman's mental fortitude was weak. He quickly lost control, allowing Oju to take the initiative. Hyungman was hit on the head with a bottle and then brutally kicked. Afterward, Oju's henchmen locked him in a car and took him to a secret building. Meanwhile, Sangpill and Jae brought the trunk of documents back to the office, where everyone searched for evidence. After a long night immersed in documents, they finally found the evidence. Seo-sik, the chairman of the largest bank in the area, was the mastermind behind Oju's large loan, and currently, he is also the one helping Oju anonymously entrust the Ozu company to carry out the Logan City project. At this time, the 7 members of the group met again. Oju happily announced that the person taking over the management of the Ozu Corporation would be banker Seo-sik. He smiled happily. At this point, Sangpill had summarized the evidence from the police files that a company had gone bankrupt after only 1 month of establishment without a business registration license. At that time, this company had received a loan of 50 billion won from the bank. Of that, 10 billion won belonged to the people of Kisung. Significantly, this was just a shell company, but it had a connection to the Ozu Corporation. In other words, the company intentionally went bankrupt to help Oju create a slush fund to steal money from the people. Therefore, they now needed to quickly take down Seo-sik to find the hiding place of Oju's slush fund. Seo-sik, being the banker, also had some power. It would be very difficult for Sangpill's group to overthrow him on their own. Therefore, they had to rely on another judge. He was an upright man, so Sangpill felt very confident in trusting the case to him. The next day, Sangpill personally went to the trial to find prosecutor Jung. Upon seeing Sangpill, Jung was initially disdainful. In his eyes, Sangpill had once been a lawless lawyer who disregarded the law. However, after seeing the case file Sangpill presented, he was forced to seriously consider the matter. Jae went to the television station and waited for a tough female reporter who had previously asked Oju if she had used any tactics when she appeared before the mayor. She was a reporter who would dig up information no matter what. She also had another nickname, Dog Reporter. As soon as she saw the female reporter, Jae approached her and stated her purpose. Moon-suk was reviewing newly opened bank accounts under false names when she noticed one account was missing. Seo-sik explained that the child had passed away a few days earlier. It turns out these villains used the names of poor orphans to open fake bank accounts, the purpose of which was to store the dirty money they obtained. Just as Oju arrived at his new office, and before he could even enjoy his new life, he received news that the prosecution had launched an investigation into the bank. Evidence had emerged that the former shell company had defrauded the bank through loans. Chairman Seo-sik was arrested for his direct involvement in the case. Prosecutor Jung had arrived in Kaesong City and, along with investigators, questioned Seo-sik. Seo-sik refused to take responsibility and tried to shift the blame to his employees. Prosecutor Jung understood that these criminals feared nothing more than losing their own lives. Therefore, Prosecutor Jung used a psychological tactic against Seo-sik, suggesting that Oju had abandoned him to save his own life. So he shouldn't bother protecting such an ungrateful person. He should take down the person who betrayed him with him. The Ozu case could not proceed because the person being investigated was under arrest. Moon-suk asked Oju to redirect her investment to her father's mother's still operating charity fund. This would sever his connection with Seo-sik and also turn the money into a secret stash. This made him somewhat suspicious and hesitant, but he eventually agreed. Meanwhile, at the abandoned building, Hungman was being tortured by Boss Choi to extract information, but to no avail. No matter how much he was tortured, he wouldn't utter a word. When the secretary arrived, Moon-suk instructed her to find the name of the judge who had fired Jae. A massage parlor employee in the room overheard this. She then went to a corner to call Jae's mother, but the secretary overheard her. After Moon-suk managed to contact the judge, she also called Jae to meet her. Seeing that Jae knew the famous female judge, the judge no longer dared to be arrogant. He immediately apologized to her for his previous actions. Moon-suk announced the end of Jae's suspension, but Jae no longer seemed happy or grateful as before. With a cold expression, Jae said that if she were allowed to resume her profession, she would expose all of Moon-suk's crimes. Moon-suk could only laugh to hide her anger. Jae returned to clean up the shop with her father. From a distance, a woman watched them, tears streaming down her face. It was Jae's biological mother. She feared her sudden appearance would disrupt their lives, but for decades she had suppressed her longing, and now she could no longer bear it. Sangpill had come to Moon-suk. He mocked her, rendering her speechless. She ran into the office and pulled out a photo of herself with Sangpill's mother. Years ago, the two were close friends, but Sangpill's mother had investigated and found evidence of Moon-suk's crimes. Sangpill's mother advised Moon-suk to turn herself in, offering to act as her lawyer and try to help her. However, Moon-suk threatened her with her son. Meanwhile, Oh-ju drove to the building where Hungman was being held. Sangpill's men, who had been secretly monitoring everything, called him to inform him. Oh-ju questioned Hungman, asking if he was the one who delivered the bank documents to Sangpill's group. Hungman laughed and admitted it. Enraged, Oh-ju ordered his men killed to cover his tracks. He then had his men set fire to the car containing Hungman's documents to destroy everything. Sangpill arrived just in time. He and Chief Tae rushed into the warehouse to fight Oh-ju's men and rescue Hungman. However, after they untied Hungman, he was struck hard on the head. Chief Tae then helped him away. Sangpill didn't stay long before he finished dealing with everything. He then ran after Hungman to help him, but because he had just suffered a fatal blow to the head, he knew he couldn't live much longer. In his final moments, he expressed remorse for his actions. He thanked Sangpill for helping him clear his name. At the same time, Hyungman hoped Sangpill would never forgive him for what he had done. After saying this, he closed his eyes and passed away forever. Meanwhile, Oh-ju was holding a press conference denouncing construction companies for cutting corners on materials and building large but shoddy projects. He also accused the union representative of accepting bribes and corruption for personal gain. Then, he exploited the people's grief over losing their homes and land to announce his grand project called Logan City. Moon-suk watched from home and was very pleased. Oh-ju also attended Hungman's funeral. Before leaving, Oh-ju tried to provoke Sangpill about his deceased mother, but she failed because Sangpill remained calm. Jae's mother also quietly attended the funeral. The two accidentally bumped into each other, causing the mother to tremble and momentarily unsure what to do. Jae, still not recognizing her mother, repeatedly apologized. With tears welling up in her eyes, Jae's mother turned to leave, but inadvertently dropped her glasses near Jae. Actually, before Hungman's death, he had revealed to Sangpill that Jae's mother was still alive. Therefore, Sangpill had already sent his subordinates to search for her whereabouts. Meanwhile, he stayed by her side, drinking with her and comforting her. Later, he carried her for a walk along the picturesque beach. Meanwhile, Jae's father was taken to Moon-suk's house. Initially, she wanted him to design the cover for her upcoming book, but then she said she wanted him to bring his daughter back to Seoul because she had reinstated her as his daughter's lawyer. It turned out that was her real purpose. She wanted Jae to leave. Moon-suk knew that Jae's father was her biggest weakness, so she would probably listen to him. As soon as he got home, he saw Sangpill carrying his daughter back to the house. He put on a stern face and called her inside. He asked if she had been reinstated, and if so, to return to Seoul to work. Jae couldn't hold back any longer and told her father that Moon-suk had masterminded her mother's disappearance years ago. He wouldn't allow her to be ungrateful to her benefactor. Believing she had been brainwashed by Sangpill, he slapped his daughter and stormed into his room. Having been kicked out of the house by her father, Jae packed her suitcase and stayed with Sangpill for a while. Meanwhile, Oh-ju visited Seo-sik in prison. When they reunited, Seo-sik was happy, thinking he was about to be saved. But Oh-ju threatened him with a video of his daughter, demanding he confess to all the crimes if he wanted to live. Just as Prosecutor Jung had said, he had been abandoned because his daughter had admitted that she was the mastermind behind everything and that no one else was manipulating things. The prosecutor's office also sent a notice requesting Prosecutor Jung to stop investigating the case. At this time, the entire law office went out for a celebratory meal to mark Jae's reinstatement. Now their office had 2 lawyers. Sangpill fed Jae meat with his chopsticks. Their overly affectionate display caused everyone who had been laughing and chatting to fall silent. To avoid attention, Sangpill promoted Cheese to manager, making her so happy that she tried to feed him some meat, but Jae stopped her. Department head Tae also asked why Jae stayed at Sangpill's office yesterday. He explained that her family had encountered some problems, so she would be staying with him for a while. Cheese felt uncomfortable and suggested that Jae come live with her. After the meal, the two went to see Prosecutor Jung. He said the prosecutor's office had forced him to stop investigating the authorization and bank case, so they had to quickly make a new plan. At this time, Uncle Dae accidentally met Jae's mother. He recognized her at first sight. He worried that if Oh-ju knew she was still alive, she would be in danger. But Jae's mother, having been lonely for so many years, could no longer bear living like that, so she had to return to Korea and would not leave again. As Uncle Dae was driving back, he was stopped by Big Boss Choi, who used to bow down to him but now dared to brazenly block his car. Big Boss Choi said Oh-ju wanted to see Uncle Dae, so he should follow them. Meanwhile, Jae's mother took a risk and applied for a massage position at Moon-suk. But before that, she had to go through the secretary's selection process. The 2 previous applicants both had national-level massage certifications, but only Jae's mother answered the secretary's questions correctly. When she started working, she acted as if she didn't see or hear anything. Because she kept her secret, she was hired. The secretary led her to Moon-suk to begin massaging. Serving her enemy prevented her from getting married, but she had to endure it all for the sake of avenging her daughter and family. Jae is currently happily in love with Sangpill. While she was working, he took her away to change her appearance, then took her to a flower shop to buy a bouquet. Afterward, he led her to a place he had prepared beforehand and unexpectedly produced a cake to celebrate her mother's birthday. This moved her to tears. At this moment, she felt she had chosen the right person. Jae gave Sangpill a kiss on the forehead to thank him. In the evening, they stood silently, gazing at the city. At this time, Uncle Dae arrived to meet Oh-ju. He smiled and cheerfully welcomed his friend Kai-sung, who had just returned from Seoul. Having been involved in the underworld for many years, the two couldn't be said to be strangers. They were both top-ranking gang leaders, but being in Oh-ju's territory, he had the upper hand. He demanded that Uncle Dae take Sangpill back to Seoul and stop ruining his career. However, Uncle Dae refused to compromise. Seeing this, Oh-ju signaled his henchmen. In a flash, they rushed forward and injected Uncle Dae with a tranquilizer, giving his men no time to react. Uncle Dae gradually lost consciousness and fainted. The next morning, he was taken to the rooftop of a building. Boss Choi called and threatened Sangpill, demanding he come immediately or his uncle would die. Jae sensed the danger and wanted to go with him, but he instructed his subordinates to watch her. He drove alone to rescue his uncle. When he arrived, his uncle was hanging precariously. He fought desperately against Oh-ju's henchmen. Suddenly, the rope pulling Uncle Dae was cut. Sangpill desperately grabbed the rope, dragging him to the wall. He used all his strength to pull his uncle up. When he finally grasped his uncle's hand, his uncle told him not to try to save him anymore, or both of them would die. His final words were a warning to his grandson not to seek revenge, to avoid going down the wrong path, and to live a good life. Then, Uncle Dae pulled his hand away from his grandson's and fell to the ground. Even more outrageous was that Oh-ju had called the police to the scene. It turned out that their men had left earlier to frame Sangpill for Uncle Dae's murder. Jae, at home, was constantly worried and anxious. After watching the news on TV, she couldn't stand still. When Oh-ju achieved his plan, he shrugged his shoulders and smiled triumphantly. However, strangely, after Moon-suk saw the news, her expression was extremely displeased. She immediately summoned Oh-ju. Unexpectedly, having risen to the position of mayor, he had become arrogant and looked down on everyone else. Instead of rushing to Moon-suk's summons, he calmly delegated tasks to his subordinates before meeting her. Meanwhile, the police and prosecutors arrived at Sangpill's law office to conduct a search. Seeing so many familiar faces handling the case made Jae uncomfortable, so she left. She went to visit Sangpill. He emerged looking frail, which deeply saddened her. Witnessing the death of his only remaining relative, he still couldn't accept it. He was so distraught that he couldn't muster the strength to do anything. Jae hugged Sangpill tightly, comforting him and offering him support. She told him to let her handle everything. At the police station, Sangpill's men were being questioned. Jae entered as a lawyer, saying that the police shouldn't interrogate innocent people like this. The police officer didn't argue with the lawyer and remained silent, allowing Jae to take the men away. Back at the office, everyone had dinner together, comforting each other, but the atmosphere remained incredibly heavy. One of the subordinates had left, fearing repercussions, making everyone even more upset. It wasn't until evening that Oh-ju came to see Moon-suk. He was no longer timid or obedient to her. He spoke to her as an equal, even arrogantly. Unexpectedly, he even dared to snatch the wine from from her. After he and Jute got drunk, he went berserk, grabbing the bottle and gulping it down in one go. These two were equally insane and wicked, knowing each other's secrets, so if the ship capsized, both would lose their lives, because their feet were chained together by a single chain of guilt. The next day, Jae personally went to Moon Suk to beg her to release Sangpill from prison on the day of Uncle Dae's funeral. She laughed and reminded Jae that she absolutely had to win the upcoming trial and ensure Sangpill was acquitted. Uncle Dae's funeral was held quickly, and all the brothers who had been kind to him attended. Among them was In-nam, a very close friend of Uncle Dae. In-nam mistakenly believed Sangpill was the real culprit behind Uncle Dae's death. Seeing Sangpill appear, In-nam was about to attack him, but the police stopped him in time. Sangpill couldn't care less about anything else. Inside, kneeling before Uncle Dae's memorial tablet, Sangpill cried loudly like a child in pain. The uncle who had protected him for so many years had truly left him forever. From now on, he had no relatives left. As the police took him away, he didn't forget to tell Chief Tae to protect Jae well. Now, she was the most important person to him. The investigator pulled Sangpill aside and asked him if he was really the son of lawyer Choi Nam-soo. Receiving an answer that seemed to have been anticipated, the investigator wasn't too surprised. After Sangpill returned to the detention center, he had to meet Oh-ju again. He constantly taunted Sangpill about his pain and provoked him to take revenge. But then, Oh-ju told him to just accept his fate in prison. But as Oh-ju was about to leave, Sangpill laughed and said that if Moon Suk wanted him acquitted, it would be difficult for Oh-ju to harm him. This situation was giving Oh-ju a huge headache. He wanted to deal with Sangpill, but couldn't go against Moon Suk's wishes. Today, while investigating the crime scene, Jae narrowly avoided being hit on the head by two falling iron bars. Luckily, Chief Tae pulled her away in time. Afterwards, she visited Sangpill in prison. They discussed the case. Jae said that all the evidence currently pointed to Sangpill, but he said he wasn't worried and hoped she wouldn't put too much pressure on herself. However, when Jae returned to the office, her father came to see her. He advised her to go back to Seoul and find a more relaxed job, telling her not to stay here because of Sangpill anymore. But Jae strongly told her father that he was the man she loved, so he couldn't say anything more. In prison, Sangpill met his former close associate, a subordinate of Uncle Dae. He explained that he hadn't killed Uncle Dae, but the man said that if he couldn't prove himself, he would die. The next morning, Sangpill's first trial was about to begin. Jae, returning to her role as a lawyer after a long time, hadn't had time to prepare a more formal suit. Surprisingly, her father personally brought her an outfit. He wasn't there for Sangpill, but for his daughter. The trial began, with the prosecution continuously presenting evidence to incriminate Sangpill. Furthermore, the murder weapons at the scene all bore his fingerprints. They even prepared a false witness to corner Sangpill. In court, the witness was brought in. He claimed to have seen Sangpill push Uncle Dae down the stairs, but when Jae asked him what color the nearby billboard was in his line of sight, he hesitated and couldn't answer. His stammering made it possible for Jae to reject his testimony due to suspicion of witness perjury. The trial adjourned for jury deliberation. 10 minutes later, the trial resumed. Prosecutor Jung presented further evidence against Sangpill, Uncle Dae's insurance policy, but Sangpill was listed as the policyholder. The motive for the murder was likely to claim the insurance money. The first trial ended completely unfavorably for Sangpill. That evening, Jae took Chief Tae and Chia's home to retrieve some items. Unexpectedly, her mother, Hun-ju, also came. She claimed she wanted to take photos to revisit her old home and spend more time with her daughter. Since the shop was closed and her father was out, Jae had to take the photos for Hyun-ju. Hun-ju wanted to leave an envelope for Jae while she went to print the photos. However, Jae's father returned, causing her to panic and leave before she could do anything. The next day, she came to see her daughter again, claiming she was the one who massaged Moon Suk. Then Hyun-ju gave Jae the envelope she had intended to leave the day before. Looking at the stack of photos inside, Jae couldn't help but be astonished. They were clear photographs showing Oh-ju helping Moon Suk commit murder years ago. In prison, Sangpill once again sought help from the Scorpion, but the trial's outcome left the Scorpion unable to trust Sangpill anymore. As soon as they met, the Scorpion beat Sangpill mercilessly. To quell the Scorpion's anger, Sangpill allowed him to stab him in the stomach with a toothbrush handle. Just then, two other inmates arrived, and they fearfully ran to call the guards. Sangpill, suppressing his pain, urged the Scorpion to leave quickly. Sangpill was rushed to the emergency room. Jae was stunned by the news. She silently prayed that he would overcome this ordeal. Outside the emergency room, Jae trembled and could barely stand, but she still bravely reassured everyone that everything would be all right. News of Sangpill being stabbed in prison spread. Even Oh-ju suspected that his subordinate had sent someone to kill him. The subordinate vehemently denied it, saying he didn't dare kill Sangpill, but had followed Oh-ju's orders to let him confess before killing him. At this point, Moon-suk suspected Oh-ju, while he suspected her. Internal conflict and distrust arose. At the hospital, a miracle occurred. Fortunately, timely emergency treatment saved Sangpill from critical condition. Everyone was overjoyed to hear this, and Jae finally breathed normally again. Jae, using her lawyer's credentials and permit, was allowed to visit Sangpill. Seeing the man she loved having just survived a life-or-death situation, she was heartbroken. She vowed to herself that she would quickly get him out of prison. He slowly opened his eyes. He smiled at her, easing her worries. The next day, Oh-ju personally came to the hospital to see Sangpill. Every time they met, it was either a threat or a provocation, so Sangpill was no stranger to it. After Oh-ju left, he encountered Prosecutor Jung. The two were enemies, so while they outwardly smiled and were polite, their words were incredibly sharp. Today, Prosecutor Jung even brought a scorpion with him, so Sangpill could confirm if it was the person who stabbed him. But Sangpill stubbornly defended the scorpion, saying that the person who stabbed him was small and not muscular like this. This made the scorpion extremely uncomfortable. The next day, Jae visited Sangpill and pushed him outside for some fresh air to relieve the stuffiness. The investigating officer in charge followed them to the prison. Everyone from the detective agency came to visit their boss, making Sangpill much happier. When he returned to the hospital room, Jae showed Sangpill a stack of photos she had received from a strange woman. Looking at these photos, Sangpill was extremely surprised. This person must be the same as his mother, who had investigated the case years ago. Meanwhile, Hyunju was still massaging Moon-suk at her private residence. Lately, she had been very unhappy with Oh-ju and didn't want him to come to her house without permission anymore. But he appeared right outside the door. He said he came to explain and listen to the explanation to avoid misunderstandings. Hyunju and her secretary were both chased out. When it came time to pay for the day's work, the secretary threw all the money on the ground, making Hyunju pick it up while saying thank you. Later, the secretary threatened Hyunju, telling her to pretend to be deaf no matter what she heard, or her life would be in danger. The next day was the cover photo shoot for Moon-suk's new book, so Jae's father prepared very early. No matter how much his daughter pleaded, he refused to believe her, leaving her utterly helpless. During the photo shoot, in order to get the best cover, Jae's father carelessly moved some things, breaking Moon-suk's precious earthenware vase, but she just said to clean up quickly so they could shoot. Jae's parents were so close, yet he still didn't recognize his wife. Moon-suk didn't seem to notice anything, but suddenly she mentioned Jae's mother, causing her to flinch slightly. Unable to suppress her longing for her daughter, Hyunju texted her to arrange a meeting to talk about a few things. After 18 years of separation, the mother struggled to hold back her tears. She talked about some things related to the photos and hinted at wanting to relive her life. Facing a stranger, Jae felt an overwhelming sense of trust in her. At the hospital, she told Sangpill that if he didn't trust her, he should trust her. This showed just how much faith she had placed in this woman. As soon as Jae left the hospital, Oh-ju arrived to visit Sangpill. Unexpectedly, In-nam's henchman, following Moon-suk's orders, also came to the hospital to eliminate Sangpill. The boss's appearance was completely unexpected. The henchman called In-nam to ask how to handle the situation. Moon-suk signaled to kill everyone without mercy. Caught off guard, Sangpill and Oh-ju had no choice but to cooperate to deal with the group in the room. Afterwards, Oh-ju untied Sangpill. After dealing with that group, another group arrived, forcing them to flee to the elevator, but the doors closed too slowly, giving them time to rush in. They were all trapped inside the elevator. A long fight ensued, and in the end, only 2 people remained standing. Sangpill hinted at the person behind the incident, but Oh-ju quickly guessed. Afterward, Sangpill returned to the office with his injuries. Seeing him like that, Jae almost burst into tears. His subordinates anxiously wanted to call for an ambulance, but Jae stopped them. She stared intently at Sangpill, making a phone call. As a martial artist, she understood that he was a criminal, and whatever his reason for fleeing, it would be used against him in court. A short while later, Prosecutor Jung arrived. Because Jae had reported the incident in time, he didn't prosecute Sangpill. Moon-suk looked at the masseuse in front of her, recalling Ko In-nam's words. Before leaving, Uncle Dae had tasked him with finding a Korean woman living in Thailand. Coincidentally, the masseuse in front of her had just returned from Thailand. Therefore, Moon-suk couldn't help but be suspicious. Soon after, the newspapers reported on the brawl at the hospital. Oh-ju hurriedly instructed his subordinates to arrange for the media not to mention his name. Having been under pressure for so long, Boss Choi couldn't take it anymore. He went berserk. The freedom of being a thug before was immense, but now being confined within such constraints was exhausting. Normally, Oh-ju would have gone mad at the complaints, but this time he remained unusually calm, having awakened to a realization. From the beginning, Moon-suk's appointment of him as mayor was part of a pre-planned scheme. Her intentions were clear when she took over the Ozu Corporation, yet he hadn't realized it. Now, only because of a subordinate's words, he was gradually coming to his senses. Today was the second trial of Sangpill. Before that, Jae received a mysterious phone call. After listening, her expression darkened. She told Sangpill that he might be frightened today, but that was okay, because she would do everything in her power to prove his innocence. The trial began. Jae requested the addition of a new witness. The court doors opened, and a witness appeared, surprising everyone. Oh-ju testified. It turned out that Jae and he had spoken earlier. He wanted to testify for Sangpill in court. Jae was hesitant because he was her and Sangpill's main enemy. But in court, everything was a gamble, a decisive one, so why not try? Therefore, she agreed to let him testify. Prosecutor Yeon-hee began questioning why Oh-ju insisted Sangpill didn't kill Uncle Dae. He frankly replied that the real culprit was his bodyguard. Everyone present started murmuring. He expressed regret that Sangpill had threatened him, causing the bodyguard to harbor resentment and create this tragedy. At that moment, the prosecutor also received news that someone had come to the police station to confess. Afterward, Oh-ju bowed to the public. First, he apologized to Sangpill for his delay in advising the bodyguard. Next, he pleaded for leniency for his loyal bodyguard. After saying this, he even sincerely knelt on the ground to express his sincerity. Although Oh-ju was on Sangpill's side, he couldn't bear to hear these words. Since someone had confessed and the city mayor himself had testified, Moon-suk had no choice but to declare Sangpill innocent. This move unexpectedly turned out to be the right one, because the newspapers and media were now full of news praising him for willingly bowing before the entire nation to plead for a reduced sentence for his loyal bodyguard and honestly confessing to save an innocent person. Some even compared him to Moon-suk, causing her considerable distress. To celebrate Sangpill's release from prison, everyone gathered on the beach to eat and drink. Jae stood in a corner, deep in thought, recalling Moon-suk's earlier words. She wanted Jae to help Sangpill get acquitted, but when Jae asked why, Moon-suk said she would only reveal it when she succeeded. Now that she succeeded, what exactly is Moon-suk's reason for wanting Sangpill innocent? Sangpill couldn't answer either, so Jae had to go to Moon-suk. But Moon-suk refused to reveal the reason, claiming Jae hadn't negotiated to win the case herself. Jae then asked Moon-suk what her purpose was in helping her regain her law degree. Unexpectedly, Moon-suk said she wanted Jae to succeed her. She wanted to groom her, but Sangpill's appearance turned everything upside down. If she were the innocent child she once was, Jae might have been seduced by these sweet words. But after discovering her hideous nature, all of Moon-suk's flattering words had no effect on Jae anymore. Suddenly, Moon-suk asked one last question that left Jae speechless. Moon-suk asked if Jae could become the Jae she used to be if her mother were still alive. Touched by the painful memory, she warned Moon-suk not to joke about the people important to her. Actually, Moon-suk wasn't sure if the massage therapist was Jae's mother. So the next day, Moon-suk deliberately arranged an important meeting with the 7-person group in front of her. Afterward, she went to see the boss, asking Oh-ju if he had the guts to betray her. He had his own plans and couldn't be disrespectful yet. He started acting submissive in front of her, then produced a photo from the day of the murder. He said someone had sent it to threaten him, saying if he didn't testify in court, they would release it online. He wasn't afraid of losing his mayoral position, only that Moon-suk's reputation would be affected, so he couldn't refuse to testify. That's why Moon-suk let the matter rest. At this time, Hyunju went to Jae and told her that Moon-suk had an important meeting at the local club at 3 p.m. the next day. Just then, Sangpill returned. Hyunju, fearing exposure, wanted to leave, but her daughter held her back, comforting her not to be afraid of Sangpill. Jae asked if she knew Sangpill's uncle. She didn't dare look Sangpill in the eye and replied that he had helped her before. Therefore, as a way of repaying him, she was now helping them find evidence to bring down Moon-suk. Afraid that the more she talked, the more information would be revealed, she made an excuse to leave. According to the information Hyunju provided, Sangpill began to explain the situation, time, and location to everyone. Since the others had already been exposed, this mission would be divided among them. The energetic woman disguised herself as a golf course employee serving Moon-suk. The person she met was Representative Joe, an ambitious man currently running for president. Moon-suk, on the other hand, was a well-known judge, hence their close relationship. This time, she agreed to support Joe on the condition that he help her secure a seat on the Seoul Supreme Court. The entire conversation was recorded by a wiretap installed in a nearby car, which Sangpill and Jae listened to. Not long after, at another trial presided over by Moon-suk, she sentenced a rapist to death. South Korea doesn't have the death penalty, so the criminal was so shocked by the verdict that he caused a disturbance in court. But Moon-suk's eyes remained cold and unwavering. Outside, she put on a facade, telling the press that she didn't care about the Supreme Court judge position. She only wanted the guilty to receive their punishment. Then she went to the statue of her great father, proudly boasting that she was about to surpass him. She had lived her whole life under his shadow, which was the reason her true nature had gradually become distorted. At this point, Sangpill appeared. He only wanted to say that it wouldn't be long before she would be sitting in the defendant's chair in Ki-sung's court. At this time, Oh-ju had arranged to speak with his secretary. Since deciding to confront Moon-suk, he seemed to have become smarter. He knew how to exploit the secretary's unwavering devotion to her daughter, telling her that once Moon-suk left Ki-sung, no one would help her anymore. Therefore, if she wanted her daughter to live peacefully, she had to side with him. She found it reasonable and intended to comply, but her long-standing loyalty hadn't crumbled yet. She cautiously approached her boss and asked if Moon-suk really intended to leave Ki-sung. Moon-suk, seeing her subordinate daring to probe her, angrily shouted. The secretary didn't dare ask any more questions. Moon-suk's goal was the position of Chief Justice of the Seoul Supreme Court, a position she had always refused before, so why would she want it now? But, in any case, she couldn't be allowed to leave Ki-sung so easily. Sangpill and Jae went to find the female reporter, who was always ready to deliver any kind of sensational news about the powerful without fear of being fired or retaliated against. Sangpill gave her the photos of Moon-suk's murder from years ago and asked her to publish them in the newspaper to let everyone know the true face of Moon-suk, whom they always respected. At this time, Moon-suk was unaware of the trouble that was about to come. She still held the party, but this time, the boss wasn't present. The secretary deliberately mentioned his name, making Moon-suk uncomfortable. The secretary, worried that her daughter was about to lose her position, secretly contacted Oh-ju. He promised to help prosecutor Yun-hee well, so the secretary agreed to cooperate with him. The next day, news of Moon-suk's murder appeared in all major and minor newspapers, causing a stir among the people. The area outside the courthouse was packed with reporters. Moon-suk didn't expect this to be leaked, but she understood she couldn't avoid it, so she answered the reporters' questions as cleverly as possible, neither admitting nor denying, waiting for the answer after the upcoming trial. She still wanted to show that she put her work first. Oh-ju was present in the photo that had been obscured. He remembered Sangpill saying that he would only consider him after Moon-suk was dealt with. It seemed Sangpill's leak had hit two targets. One was targeting Moon-suk, and the other was threatening Mr. Jung. In any case, the first move had succeeded, and everyone in the detective agency had reason to celebrate. Afterwards, Sangpill secretly went to see Jae's mother alone. He thanked her for the photos that had helped him and Jae so much, but then he asked her not to try to approach Jae again, because he couldn't trust anyone whose identity was unknown. Seeing this, she revealed her true identity. Sangpill was extremely surprised, but what was special was that the woman before him was also his savior from years ago. He was moved to tears, relieved that she was still alive. She asked him to keep it a secret. When the time was right, she would tell her daughter her true identity. Then she asked Sangpill to stay away from her daughter, because after observing her for a while, she realized that her daughter would not be safe by his side. This was very cruel, but she hoped he would understand a mother's feelings. Sangpill loved Jae, so he didn't know how to respond. Then he went to find the Scorpion. There, the Scorpion told Sangpill that he went to prison on Uncle Dae's orders to protect Sangpill. This made Sangpill think of Jae, so before leaving, he decided to teach her how to protect herself. At this time, Moon-suk was very worried about the news when Representative Jo called. He warned her to either remove the news or provide a satisfactory explanation. Otherwise, she shouldn't even think about the Supreme Court's trial seat. He gave her only one day to deal with the issue. Cornered, she suddenly came up with a new idea. The next day, she proactively held a press conference, saying that a few days earlier she had received an anonymous threatening video. Now, with these photos, she believed that some organization or group had planned to prevent Ki-sung from becoming Logan City. Therefore, she had been silently thinking of a solution. But now that the photos had been published in the press, spreading misinformation, she couldn't handle it alone anymore. She also assured the people that she had absolutely no involvement in the case. After hearing this, her supporters loved her even more. It is clear that her image as an upright judge had been deeply ingrained in the minds of the people of Ki-sung. All she had to do was call for them to raise their support signs. All she had to do was declare herself innocent. Suddenly, the father of the executed man appeared. He angrily smashed a bottle of wine on her head, causing chaos. Oh-ju read the news, and a look of amusement spread through him. But having not yet taken revenge, he still had to bow and visit Moon-suk at the hospital. She ordered him, in his capacity as mayor, to inform reporters that she was still in a coma. After receiving the order, he left with a smug smile on his face. Sangpill and Jae realized something was amiss with this attack. Finally, they found a video recorded by a citizen. In the video, Moon-suk could clearly have dodged the blow, but she chose to endure it. Clearly, she wanted to exploit this dangerous situation to gain public sympathy. The news reports that the 18-year-old photograph might have been faked made her smile with satisfaction. once this news spread, no one cared about the photo anymore. Moon-suk had successfully transformed herself from perpetrator into victim. But lately, Sangpill had been deliberately avoiding Jae. Before she could even finish talking about Moon-suk, he stood up and left. She was angry, but had to suppress her rage. At this time, 2 of the 7 members of the group came to visit Moon-suk. The chief prosecutor said that the man who assaulted her had been imprisoned and would be severely punished according to her wishes, but she said not to do anything to him. Then she ordered the editor-in-chief to call the reporters for an interview. Standing before the journalists, she played her role perfectly, appearing weak and kind-hearted, saying that it was because she had sentenced his son to death that he became agitated. She understood the psychology of a parent and therefore did not pursue criminal charges against him. The people applauded her for her compassion. Even the father cried and knelt down in remorse. Jae and Sangpill couldn't stand this charade any longer. He stepped forward and asked Moon-suk if she had intentionally avoided the bottle of wine. Moon-suk smiled and said the photo was fake. She had already explained it at the press conference the day before. After saying that, she left amidst the cheers of the crowd. Sangpill also left Jae and himself with Chief Tae, walking away without looking back. Lately, he had been deliberately ignoring her, making her wonder if she had done something wrong. If it was due to the tiring nature of his work, he shouldn't be so indifferent. Actually, Sangpill wasn't feeling well either, but compared to Jae's safety, love had to be put aside. He could only confide in Chief Tae about Jae's mother still being alive. He instructed Chief Tae not to tell Jae yet. After a night of reflection, Sangpill decided to meet Hyunju and agreed to leave Jae. But before leaving, he wanted to ask if she had sent him this notebook. She flipped open the ledger. The contents were all documents related to Moon-suk, but it wasn't hers. Sangpill fell into doubt. When he was in Seoul, it was precisely this ledger that had given him the stability to make the decision to return to Kisung. If it wasn't her, who else knew Moon-suk so thoroughly? By this time, the 2 venomous snakes had turned their backs on each other. Early that morning, Oju received news from his subordinate that his Logan City project had been cancelled. Not only that, all related branch projects had been cancelled, and the investment money was completely lost. Unable to accept the truth, he rushed to find Moon-suk and asked why she had done this, given that she had invested in those projects. But Moon-suk only explained that the projects had encountered problems and were therefore cancelled. Only then did he realize it was all a trap. She wanted to swallow up all his assets, turning him into a hollow mayor to easily control him. Even the lawyer who used to be submissive to Oju dared to slap him in the face to wake him up. Everyone has their golden age. Now it's time for Oju's golden age to end. He angrily got into his car and drove back. Big brother Choi still didn't know what had happened. He happily said that his younger brother wanted to build a skyscraper in Kaesung, but the permit hadn't been approved by the government yet, and he wanted Oju's help to make things go smoothly. Then Oju made him park his car by the roadside and vented all his anger on him. To Oju, he was just a punching bag to vent his anger on, not someone he was close to. At the same time, Sangpill gathered his gang, preparing to act. This time, Jae wouldn't be there because he wanted to handle things quickly and efficiently, so he would do it the old way and not go through the legal channels anymore. Sangpill wanted revenge for the thug, a blood debt that could be repaid with blood. Boss Choi, still humiliated after being beaten up by Oju, was dragged into the bar where he was trying to relieve stress by Sangpill's men. A short while later, he was blindfolded and hung dangling from a tall building. He begged for mercy, but Sangpill paid no heed to the villain's feelings. Sangpill calmly questioned him about how he had harmed Uncle Dae. Terrified, he confessed that Oju was behind it all. He had secretly hidden evidence on his phone to avoid being blamed. Even after obtaining the phone, Sangpill coldly ordered the ropes cut. In reality, it wasn't a tall building, but just a shallow hole. Falling wouldn't be fatal. Compared to killing him, Sangpill was more interested in seeing how Oju would handle this man. Oju was furious with his secretary for demanding her investment money in the Logan City project. She had driven him mad, and he had lost more money than she had. Before she could even express her anger, Sangpill arrived, smiling brightly, and reminded him to check the news tomorrow. Already enraged, he was further enraged by the sight of someone and pulled out a gun, aiming it directly at Sangpill. But Sangpill showed no fear and steadily approached Oju. Then he raised his hand in a gun-like gesture, smirked, and turned to leave. Oju became even more furious. When Sangpill returned, Chief Tae happily announced that he had found evidence in the phone. Inside was Oju's order to kill Uncle Dae. This evidence was perfect, but they didn't submit it to the court immediately. Instead, they had to release it online first. This was because Sangpill wanted to confirm the owner of the notebook. Soon after, the news of the mayor's order to kill caused a huge wave of outrage online. Boss Choi, knowing he couldn't escape, also went to hiding. After seeing the news, Jae angrily sought out Sangpill for a private private conversation. She wasn't angry because he acted on his own accord, but because he hadn't told her anything beforehand. His recent behavior had also deeply saddened her. Faced with her expectations, he chose silence. This disappointed her, and she left. Taking advantage of the growing boycott of the mayor, Moon-suk and her accomplices decided to bring him down once and for all. They obtained documents detailing the money spent on the mayor's election. They showed the chief prosecutor everything he had obtained through bribery. Oh-ju was unaware of the even greater storm brewing before him, and he was still plotting revenge against Sangpill. Jae returned to the office and immediately received a lunch appointment with Hyun-ju. Jae had long harbored special feelings for this woman, so she went to meet her right away. They had a simple lunch, talking about simple things. While they were eating, Jae suddenly had difficulty breathing. Hyun-ju panicked and searched through the food, discovering shrimp. She immediately called for help because her daughter was allergic to shrimp. Jae asked Hyun-ju how she knew she was allergic to shrimp. Suddenly, Hyun-ju didn't know how to answer, so she chose to leave. Jae didn't give up. She continued calling Hyun-ju and told her that only her mother knew about her shrimp allergy. Hyun-ju didn't dare answer the phone. Since her daughter knew her true identity, she had to act quickly. She sent a message informing Sangpill of her actions. Then, she took the packet of anesthetic to Moon-suk's house. While no one was looking, she poured the powder into a cup of tea. Unexpectedly, all her plans were seen through by Moon-suk. Looking at Jae's mother, Moon-suk calmly said she didn't want to drink tea. Then, while Hyun-ju was getting a massage, the judge suddenly grabbed her hand and threw her aside. She said she knew everything. Hyun-ju didn't pretend anymore, grabbing a nightlight and preparing to fight Moon-suk. But being in enemy territory, she was quickly subdued. Meanwhile, Sangpill had arrived at Hyun-ju's private residence. He had previously warned Moon-suk that she would soon find out her true identity and that approaching her was dangerous. But Hyun-ju couldn't wait any longer and wanted to act quickly. Sangpill was lost in worry when Jae suddenly appeared. She was shocked to realize that Sangpill knew about her mother's existence but hadn't told her. Now she couldn't contact her mother, so she suspected her mother was in danger. Jae confronted Moon-suk and asked where she had hidden her mother. Moon-suk said Jae's mother had disappeared 18 years ago, but Jae knew Moon-suk was hiding her mother, so she kept questioning her. Seeing this, Moon-suk called the security guards. A short while later, Sangpill appeared. The guards restrained him, preventing him from acting. Knowing that being too forceful would only make things harder, he promised to get Jae out of there. Hearing this, Moon-suk ordered the guards to release her. Sangpill tried to get Jae to leave. When Jae went outside, her mood was unstable, and she said harsh things to her lover. She believed that his revenge was what caused her to lose her mother again. Sangpill just silently watched her, unable to say anything more. That night, Prosecutor Jung personally came to see Sangpill. The case of the mayor ordering the murder had been opened for investigation. He had just received the documents from the chief prosecutor regarding the source of the money that helped Oh-ju win the mayoral election. Today, he came here only to confirm whether these documents were also provided by Sangpill. Of course, it wasn't Sangpill, but this also helped him realize that the person who gave him the notebook was Moon-suk. She had done many bad things not without fear, but had prepared in advance. She even knew Sangpill's identity, which is why she used the notebook to lure him to Ki-sung. She exploited his desire for revenge, turning it into a weapon to eliminate everyone involved in the 18-year-old case. Then she would eliminate Sangpill as well, but Sangpill would never let her succeed. The person he worried about most right now was Jae, but she wasn't at the office. Unable to find her mother, Jae risked everything to confront Oh-ju. She suspected he was hiding her mother. When he heard that her mother was the masseur for Moon-suk, he was shocked. So, his attempt to kill Hung-man years ago had failed. Jae couldn't care less about that. She made a deal with Oh-ju. If he found her mother, she would be his defense lawyer. After all the lawyers in Kaesung were afraid of Moon-suk, so now only Jae could save him. Oh-ju also had a plan. Jae's mother was a witness to Moon-suk's murder 18 years ago. Finding this woman could mean dragging Moon-suk down into the abyss. But before he could think of a way to save them, he received a phone call telling him to return for an investigation. Sangpill went to see Scorpion and told him that In-nam had betrayed the organization. He had replaced Uncle Dae and handed over all the subordinates to Moon-suk to command. Scorpion had known this for a long time. He also explained that the reason he came to Kaesung was because Uncle Dae had visited him in prison before he passed away and entrusted him with the responsibility of protecting Sangpill. So now, the two would stand side by side. After returning to the organization, Scorpion would still have to play the role of In-nam's subordinate. Hyun-ju was also brought here and locked up by the secretary. The secretary thought she still had work to do with Moon-suk, so after completing her task, she ran back to flatter her. Moon-suk said, "That woman was brought here by you. What does that have to do with me? I didn't pursue your responsibility, and now you're coming back to tell me?" These words contained no threats, but they made the secretary tremble with fear. She wanted to deny everything and shift all the blame onto the secretary. Oh-ju only dared to stay in his car, not daring to return to the city hall for fear of being taken away by the prosecutor's men. Now that Moon-suk was gone and his company was gone, anyone could harm him. So he called his secretary and asked her about Jae's mother's whereabouts. Only she could save him. But the secretary wasn't trustworthy. She said she was giving a massage to the judge and hung up. Clearly, these two people couldn't cooperate. The secretary was only devoted to her daughter. She didn't care about the lives of others. She told the prosecutor that if he wanted the judge to save his life, he had to prove his capabilities. So he should take this opportunity to capture Oh-ju for Moon-suk. Then, she would show him favor. Sangpill was secretly following and protecting Jae when he received a call from the Scorpion reporting that Hyunju had been found. After ending the call, the Scorpion approached Hyunju. Seeing the tattoo on the man's arm, Hyunju remembered Sangpill's words that a man with a scorpion tattoo would come to rescue her. At this point, Hyunju felt less worried. Meanwhile, Jae learned of the Scorpion's existence from the investigator. She insisted that Chief Tae take her there, putting him in a difficult position. Sangpill had tasked him with protecting her and preventing her from wandering around. Jae was determined to find the Scorpion, so Sangpill reluctantly offered to take her to him. That place turned out to be In Nam's hideout. Undeterred, Jae asked the Scorpion where her mother was. Unable to reveal their identities, the Scorpion and Sangpill nearly came to blows in front of In Nam. Outside, Sangpill called Oh-ju, taunting him that Moon-suk's new dog seemed to have successfully replaced him as the new boss, even taking over his old bar as his headquarters. These provocative words angered Oh-ju somewhat, but then he realized that defeating In Nam would save Hyunju. He planned to scout the enemy first, but before that, he had to return to his office to get a few things. Unexpectedly, he encountered the long-missing boss Choi there. As soon as they met, Choi knelt down and begged for forgiveness. Oh-ju drew his gun and cocked it, ready to shoot the traitor. But he needed someone by his side, so he didn't strike. He was so pathetic that he accepted even a traitor. Meanwhile, Moon-suk was soaring. She held a press conference announcing her departure from Kaesong to Seoul to become the Supreme Court Justice. She ordered her secretary to close all bank accounts under her name, including those opened under the names of orphans. The secretary was a little suspicious, but when she heard that all the remaining money could be transferred to her and her daughter's accounts, she happily accepted the order. She worked very quickly and efficiently. The next day, she had dealt with all the fake accounts, converting the virtual currency into cash and storing it in a secret location. This wouldn't affect Moon-suk's hearing, so she was extremely satisfied. The secretary was also very cooperative. She promised to handle Hyunju smoothly, ensuring no one would hinder Moon-suk's career path. A short while later, she arrived at the bar and ordered In Nam to neatly dispose of Hyunju. But she never imagined that a hidden camera on the wall had recorded the entire incident. Scorpio heard the news and quickly informed Sangpill. In Nam then took the secretary's video to Moon-suk. She told them to deal with Jae's mother and then blame the secretary. Hyunju was tied up, gagged, and about to be stuffed into a box, but Scorpio claimed she understood In Nam. He needed to personally verify the hostage before killing her, so he couldn't stuff her into the box yet. Meanwhile, Oh-ju confirmed that Sangpill's statement was true, that someone was indeed stealing his territory, so he set out to act. When he arrived, Sangpill was also there, smiling because everything was going according to his plan. Inside, In Nam had witnessed Hyunju being locked in a barrel. Suddenly, his henchmen ran in to report that the mayor had arrived, forcing In Nam to hand over the matter to the Scorpion gang and deal with the situation outside. Oh-ju warned In Nam about his future fate. He warned that once In Nam was no longer useful, he would be discarded. Therefore, while he still had everything in his hands, it was best to gradually retreat. Before In Nam left, he should hand over Hyunju to settle the matter. In Nam, being a newly promoted gang leader, couldn't tolerate this humiliation and immediately stood up, wanting to fight. Oh-ju pulled out his gun and shot down In Nam's henchman as a warning. At that moment, Boss Choi saw someone pushing the barrel out and chased after them. Someone obstructed him in the middle of the field, forcing him to stay and fight, which delayed him. The barrel had been thrown into the sea. The means by which he could communicate with Jae to have her protect him had sunk into the deep ocean. He was helpless, but could do nothing more than retreat. But as he turned to leave, he didn't notice Sangpill driving past him. Sure enough, Hyunju appeared in Sangpill's car. She was the only witness in Moon-suk's murder case from years ago. So, before Moon-suk confirmed her death, she became even more frantic. When In Nam handed everything over to the Scorpion gang, Sangpill and his men had already hidden at the scene. They waited for In Nam to go out to deal with Oh-ju before coming out to rescue Hyunju and putting rocks in the barrel to deceive In Nam's subordinates. After this life-or-death situation, Hyunju finally agreed to meet her daughter. After 18 years of not seeing each other, no words could describe the longing they felt for each other. Only a tearful, tight embrace spoke volumes. Sangpill gave the mother and daughter some space. After acknowledging her relative, Hyunju told her daughter that she had prevented Sangpill from revealing her survival and had asked him to stay away from her daughter because she feared for her safety. But after everything that had happened, she realized she was wrong. That young man had the courage to protect her daughter. It turned out that Jae had misunderstood Sangpill, but she didn't blame her mother. She smiled, realizing that the people she loved her even more than anyone else. However, back at the office, Jae was still angry and hit Sangpill. Then she arranged to talk privately. Sangpill had never felt so afraid, but what he feared most was her words of farewell. But he had thought it over. She only wanted to hold him tightly, never letting go. Hyunju was considered to have lost her life, so she couldn't stay in Kisung any longer. For her safety, she was forced to leave once again. This time, everyone came to say goodbye to her. The atmosphere was warm, cheerful, and not lonely. After seeing her off, Sangpill told Jae about the notebook. He planned to bring back those Moon-suk wanted to eliminate to confront her. Then, Sangpill showed his trusted associates all the information he had gathered over the past few years. Moon-suk thought things were still going according to her plan, so they needed to cooperate to lure her into a trap. At that moment, the secretary had just dropped her daughter off at work when she was surrounded by the police. The investigators said they received a video of the secretary ordering thugs to kidnap and kill a Thai massage therapist. She was utterly shocked. Yeonhee was also stunned, not knowing what to do. She never expected that her boss, to whom she had served for so many years, would strike such a painful blow. Oh-ju was also facing arrest, but the police only confiscated a few items from his home. He had already hidden very well. The secretary was under investigation, but she remained arrogant and fearless, believing Moon-suk would surely save her. She repeatedly used her relationship with Moon-suk to threaten the investigators. Prosecutor Jung showed her the video evidence, rendering her speechless. She immediately called Moon-suk for help. Even at this point, she still tried to deceive herself into believing she would be saved. But Moon-suk's ruthlessness was evident. Sangpill went to see Prosecutor Jung and told him that the video evidence was provided by the chief prosecutor. Therefore, Moon-suk was definitely behind this case. This statement successfully piqued Prosecutor Jung's curiosity, making him determined to investigate. Leaving the prosecutor's office, Sangpill guessed that Moon-suk wouldn't preside over the secretary's trial, but would hand it over to a judge under her authority. As he suspected, Moon-suk had assigned the trial to Mr. Hong. Later, Sangpill visited the secretary in prison. She deserved her comeuppance, so a little provocation wouldn't hurt. After all, this woman had worked with Moon-suk for a long time. The secretary had kept some of her illicit transaction records for safekeeping, so Sangpill wanted to make an exchange. He would take the records, and the secretary would have a lawyer to defend her. But she refused Sangpill's offer. It wasn't just her who was miserable. Oh Jung was also in a pitiful situation. Once a powerful figure, and even the mayor, he was now reduced to a beggar, yet he still clung to the illusion that things would return to normal. At the same time, Jae went to see Moon-suk. She put on a show of grief over the loss of her mother, calling her a wicked demon. Then, Jae cheerfully went to see the investigator to learn more about the case. She was unaware that a pair of eyes were watching her. Oh-ju, with nowhere else to run, had no choice but to turn the tables. He targeted Jae because he knew she was Sangpill's fatal weakness. He filmed Jae walking with the investigator and then threatened Sangpill he could harm her at any time. This naturally terrified Sangpill. He immediately called to confirm Jae's condition. Fortunately, she was fine, and Chief Tae and others were with her for protection. Hearing this, Sangpill smiled with relief. At the same time, Prosecutor Yeonhee desperately begged Moon-suk to save her mother. But Moon-suk told her she had to be fair in this matter. Yeonhee said that her mother had given her the company's sponsorship ledgers. This meant that she had access to all the financial records, including Moon-suk's slush and dirty money. Moon-suk could no longer maintain her facade. Her face revealed a sinister expression. She couldn't believe her secretary dared to use this to threaten her. But Moon-suk resolutely refused to save her secretary. Moon-suk used Yeonhee's career as leverage, telling the secretary to meekly accept the blame. The secretary sat in prison, anxiously awaiting a visit from Moon-suk. Finally, she waited for Moon-suk to come. But as soon as Moon-suk opened her mouth, she completely shifted all blame onto the secretary. The secretary was utterly furious. From the beginning, treating each other with money only led to this outcome. Sangpill and the Scorpion gang treated him with brotherhood. So when the Scorpion was mistreated in the gang, Sangpill led his men into a fierce battle to save him. Once Sangpill took action, he was unbeatable. With a few basic moves, Sangpill defeated In-nam and his gang. They were once brothers, but In-nam betrayed Sangpill, so Sangpill wouldn't call him boss. Traitors must face the punishments imposed by the gang. However, today Sangpill would give In-nam two choices: either accept the Scorpion gang's punishment or face the law. In-nam was capable, but having lost, he would probably know which option suited him best. Meanwhile, the secretary sat in prison, seething with resentment. The next day, Yeon-hee brought confidential documents to Sangpill. She said her mother had agreed to cooperate with him to overthrow Moon-suk, provided he defended her mother well. However, he bluntly stated that he would punish Moon-suk but would not spare the secretary either, as she had committed many evil deeds. Among the documents Yeon-hee gave him were only the financial records of Moon-suk's company, but Sangpill understood that the secretary had instructed her daughter to only give him these documents to let him know she was holding evidence of Moon-suk's crimes. To obtain them, he had to save her, so Sangpill became the secretary's lawyer. He guided her to reveal that Moon-suk was behind it all. She readily agreed. This was exactly what Sangpill wanted. At the same time, Oh-ju began his revenge in his own way. Go-won was leisurely jogging when he was stopped by Oh-ju's men. Then came a barrage of punches and kicks in revenge against this manipulative scammer. The local supreme lawyer was now beaten and begging for mercy. Oh-ju threatened him to tell Moon-suk that she would be next. Moon-suk had already gone to Sangpill's office. She was curious why he chose to be the lawyer for the secretary who almost killed Jae's mother. Sangpill wasn't easily swayed by her words anymore. She usually offered suggestions and manipulated him into following her plans, but now that method was outdated. Soon, the trial of the secretary began. Yeon-hee, who had spent years as a prosecutor specializing in prosecuting criminals, was now facing prosecution against her own mother, leaving her extremely flustered. Before the trial started, Sangpill requested a change of judge. He hinted that he suspected the judge's verdict was unfair, and therefore, the next trial absolutely had to have a different judge, even if it meant revoking his law license. When Moon-suk arrived, Sangpill began his argument. He projected onto the screen the most luxurious villa in Ki-sum, valued at 3 billion won on the market. However, Judge Hong had only bought it for 100 million won. These pieces of evidence were all meticulously investigated by Jae-suk had discovered Judge Hong's weakness, his mistress. Based solely on these suspicious circumstances, it was enough reason to change the judge. Given Sangpill's presentation and the related evidence, Prosecutor Jung readily requested a change of judge. The first trial ended without any further debate, but Jae had disappeared. It turned out that while the trial was still ongoing, she had received a call from Oh-ju. He wanted her to meet him, threatening to harm her father if she refused. Therefore, she rushed to the meeting place. Sangpill left the courtroom to find Jae, but as soon as he reached the lobby, he was surrounded by reporters. They asked him who deserved to sit in that judge's chair. Sangpill cleverly replied, "Of course it's the fairest and most upright judge, Ki-sum." His eyes, filled with confidence, stared directly at Moon-suk, who was not far away. He would force her back into the judge's chair and then make her unmask herself. As he got into his car, he received a call from his girlfriend, but the voice on the other end was Oh-ju's. He jumped up, overwhelmed by intense anxiety. He quickly drove to the location Oh-ju had requested. Standing in the abandoned warehouse, he angrily shouted Oh-ju's name. Sangpill knew Oh-ju was targeting him. Sangpill warned Oh-ju not to touch a single hair on her head. Oh-ju acknowledged Sangpill's courage for risking his life to come here for the woman he loved. Oh-ju pulled out a gun, pointed it at Sangpill's forehead, and forced him to kneel. For Jae's safety, Sangpill had no choice but to comply. Not stopping there, Oh-ju also wanted Sangpill's life, but Jae rushed out to stop him. She took the black notebook provided by Moon-suk from her lover's pocket. Looking at the detailed contents inside, Oh-ju froze. It turned out that everything was Moon-suk's plan. She had committed evil deeds and written everything down in this notebook. She wanted to use Sangpill to eliminate people one by one for her. Oh-ju was furious. For years he had served Moon-suk, yet in the end he was just someone whose name was recorded in the Book of Life and Death. Sangpill then said he had a way to eliminate Moon-suk, but Oh-ju had to testify in court. Either he would hide everywhere, or he would confess and receive leniency. After a moment of thought, Oh-ju emptied his gun, leaving only one bullet. After all, he had his own rules. This time, everything depended on luck. Then Oh-ju handed the gun to Jae and began to fight Sangpill. The two fought fiercely, neither gaining the upper hand. Jae didn't dare to strike. She was afraid of accidentally shooting Sangpill. She also didn't want to kill anyone. After all, Oh-ju had been through the underworld for many years and was twice Sangpill's age, so he had the advantage. Both were exhausted and sat down on the ground. At this point, Oh-ju lowered his voice and asked what he would gain after testifying. Now that he had lost everything, this was his only option, so he couldn't refuse. What Sangpill could do was help Oh-ju withdraw the arrest warrant so he would be eligible to testify in court. Sangpill had organized a protest outside the courthouse demanding Judge Hong resign from her position as judge handling the case. These protesters were also fans of Moon-suk, so she could only smile and wave, unable to do anything else. The wave of public opinion forced Moon-suk to sit in the judge's chair again before transferring transferring to Seoul. But she felt this was too dangerous. Her people, however, thought otherwise and advised her to view this trial as an opportunity to prove she deserved the Supreme Court judgeship in Seoul. A former secretary who worked for her argued that the fact her loyal subordinates were still tried as usual proved she was a fair judge. But she remained deep in thought, not responding. Then, Representative Joe himself advised her to see this as an opportunity to completely erase the previous drama. He was certain the Supreme Court seat would belong to Moon Suk. Moon Suk understood this was Sangpill's scheme, but she still wanted to see what the young man from back then could do. After learning that Moon Suk would be presiding over her trial, the secretary frantically called Sangpill, requesting an urgent meeting. This time, Jae was also present, acting as the secretary's defense lawyer. Seeing her continued doubts, Sangpill explained that he wanted to pressure Moon Suk and that Jae was the best card to play. Hearing this, the secretary began to explain that she initially didn't know the masseuse was Jae's mother. Understanding this attempt to evade responsibility, Sangpil stated directly that her ultimate enemy was Moon Suk, and therefore she wouldn't seek revenge against the secretary. Then, Sangpil provoked the secretary by telling her that Editor-in-Chief Han would be a witness in the upcoming trial. The secretary was indignant. Clearly, he was just a mere errand boy like herself. Why should she go to jail while he testified? At this point, the secretary didn't care about going to jail anymore. She just wanted to drag Moon Suk down with her. This reaction from the secretary was exactly what Sangpil and Jae wanted. But that wasn't enough to ensure the trial went as smoothly as possible. Besides Oju, they needed another witness. That was none other than In-nam. In-nam had lost a fight the day before, so he had to agree to testify in court today. On the surface, that was true, but after Sangpil left, In-nam called Moon Suk to inform her. Sangpil wasn't foolish enough to trust a traitor. The witness he was really targeting was the Scorpion who had observed all of In-nam's crimes. Moon Suk approached Yeon-hee, telling her to persuade her mother to confess to all the crimes because the incriminating evidence was already overwhelming. Afterward, Moon Suk would support her on her legal career path, helping her become the best female prosecutor. Otherwise, Moon Suk feared that the lives of both mother and daughter would end there. The threat was so clear and terrifying that Yeon-hee hesitated. She had pursued her career her whole life for the sake of achieving glory, but now she had to sacrifice her own mother? The next day was the secretary's second trial. But before the trial began, Moon Suk approached her privately and used her daughter's career to threaten the secretary. For that woman, her daughter was everything she valued most. Therefore, faced with the threat, the secretary dared not resist. She confirmed whether Moon Suk would help her daughter if she pleaded guilty. Having worked for Moon Suk for decades, the secretary knew the answer, but she still tried to deceive herself because she had no other choice. She didn't need Moon Suk's help as long as her daughter's career wasn't ruined. The trial began with the prosecution showing video evidence. Then, Editor-in-Chief Han appeared and took the witness seat. He said the secretary believed she was arrogant because she worked for Moon Suk and often scolded the servants. Hearing this, she became furious. Jae questioned why they had a friendship that lasted over 30 years. He cleverly refused to answer. Jae continued to ask if their friendship involved any exploitation or ulterior motives. He pointed to the secretary and said that if there was any benefit, it would be her. She was very angry. The two argued in court. Sangpil seized the opportunity to mention the Logan City project. He said Editor-in-Chief Han had collaborated with the secretary, but because he received a small percentage, he betrayed her. The purpose of this question was to make him lose his temper. Sure enough, he became angry and said, "How could I dare betray her? I had to write many free newspaper articles for her about that project." Sangpil smiled triumphantly. He tried to justify himself, but his words had lost their weight. Sangpil determined that the witness provided by the prosecutor was highly likely to be lying, so he wanted to call his own witness to the courtroom, the Scorpion. According to the prearranged plan, the Scorpion admitted to killing the massage parlor employee. Sangpil explained on his behalf that he and the employee had no enmity, so why would he kill her? There was only one possibility. He received orders from a superior. The Scorpion confirmed that he received orders from an anonymous superior, but there was another thing. When the massage parlor employee was killed, she tried to mention a man of very high status, but the Scorpion couldn't remember this man's name. Moon Suk didn't expect Sangpil to come all the way to this country to prolong the trial. Therefore, she had no choice but to comply with the proceedings, which involved convicting the Scorpion and concluding the trial. After the trial, Sangpil persuaded the secretary that if she wanted to win, she had to reveal Moon Suk's name as the mastermind in the third trial. But she hesitated, worried about her daughter's career. He noticed the strange look in her eyes. What was she plotting? He told Jae that they needed to keep the secretary's hand tight. If she confessed, all their efforts would be wasted. They split up to act. Jae went to find Prosecutor Jung, begging him to drop the Oju case. She even risked taking taking him to meet her mother. The alleged victim was still alive and well, surprising Prosecutor Jung. With the added help of the investigators who recounted Moon-suk's crimes from 18 years ago to Prosecutor Jung, Oh-ju shifted his neutral stance to their side. Then, Oh-ju confidently went to see Moon-suk. Strangely, there wasn't a single bodyguard around. He easily went straight upstairs to meet her. Unaware that she had secretly arranged for snipers, he drew his gun and threatened her, saying a few words to save his life. But perhaps it was he who needed to save his life now. Moon-suk said he was the enemy who killed Sangpill's mother, and now siding with him would certainly not end well. Oh-ju pondered deeply. That evening, Sangpill called Oh-ju to inform him that his arrest warrant had been lifted. Next, he was given the choice of testifying or continuing to flee. In prison, the secretary sat dejectedly in a corner. She received another letter from a fellow inmate. After reading its contents, her expression changed. She seemed to have made a decision. A third trial was quickly organized. Unlike previous occasions, this time, Sangpill asked the judge to allow the defendant to present everything herself. Moon-suk thought she had already intimidated the secretary, so she happily agreed to Sangpill's request. The secretary looked at her daughter, then turned to look at Moon-suk. Moon-suk had said that if she confessed, her daughter would be protected. Sangpill had also said that Moon-suk was only using them. Therefore, they had to bring the evil enemy to justice. Yeon-hee was a righteous person, so she surely hoped her mother would do the same. These two conflicting thoughts overwhelmed the secretary, causing her to faint on the spot. Sangpill looked at Moon-suk and knew she was definitely involved in this matter. Immediately afterward, he received a call from Oh-ju refusing to testify in this trial. The judge's chair was empty. Perhaps Moon-suk knew this outcome and had left long ago. Sangpill was left alone, feeling defeated. Oh-ju didn't side with Moon-suk. He only thought of himself. Although Sangpill requested that he be granted temporary amnesty, it was only temporary. Moreover, they were enemies, so his only option now was to flee South Korea. This was the best course of action once the temporary amnesty expired. He thought he had calculated everything carefully. Unexpectedly, he hadn't considered the people around him. He was betrayed by his own secretary, a spy planted by Moon-suk. Only Boss Choi, considered a loyal dog, rushed to protect him. By the time Sangpill arrived, Oh-ju was still alive. The two men engaged in a fight. The secretary lost and fled, but the one who suffered the loss was Oh-ju. He had lost his loyal subordinate, his last remaining brother, and he no longer cared about anything. He asked Sangpill if there was still a chance to testify in court. After receiving the answer that it wasn't too late, he warily dragged his money bag away. Sangpill didn't try to stop him. Everything has to be voluntary to succeed. At this point, the secretary also woke up. She said that she didn't know how to answer that day, so she pretended to faint. Jae persuaded her that the more she avoided the issue, the longer it would drag on, never ending. While she was still hesitating, Sangpill appeared and said Oh-ju would testify in court. Now it was just a matter of which path she would choose. This trial was decisive, so she should consider it carefully. To prevent Moon-suk from arbitrarily controlling the trial, it had to be widely publicized. In Kisum, no one dared to report on Moon-suk, except for reporter Ju. She was also very happy to do something prominent after a long period of silence. To ensure no one dared to overthrow her, Moon-suk once again went to the secretary and repeatedly said Sangpill was lying. Oh-ju wouldn't dare to go to court. Seeing the secretary wavering, Moon-suk still didn't dare to let her guard down. After leaving the cell, she told lawyer Go-hun to find a way to render Oh-ju and the secretary's testimony useless. The final trial took place. Immediately afterward, the video of the secretary ordering the murder was played again. But in this video, Moon-suk's name was mentioned again because it was the original footage. The previous footage had been tampered with. The investigator sat in the witness chair because he had provided the video. Jae asked him where he got this evidence. The investigator said it was provided by the chief prosecutor, so he was brought to court to testify. But he wasn't afraid because he had prepared his answer. The video had no source because it was sent to him anonymously. Sangpill deliberately said that he, as chief prosecutor Kai-sung, was deliberately concealing the real culprit. So could that culprit have a higher position than the prosecutor? Last time, the witness who dropped the evidence in court also mentioned someone with a high position. Everyone there started murmuring, feeling that this statement made sense, but the chief prosecutor still refused to answer. To quickly bring things to a close, Moon-suk had her secretary present the case. The secretary admitted to all the crimes. Moon-suk hastily ordered that since the defendant had pleaded guilty, the trial should end there. Sangpill immediately raised her hand to stop her, saying that the secretary had only admitted to instigating the murder. Now it was necessary to determine whether she was acting on orders or acting on her own initiative. With foreign reporters present in court, Moon-suk couldn't make a personal judgment. Therefore, she had no choice but to continue the trial. Sangpill asked the secretary if anyone had ordered her to kill Hyun-ju. This was her last chance to expose the evil person person. The secretary finally admitted that someone had indeed ordered her to kill. Without fear, the secretary emphasized that the culprit was the judge with the highest authority in the courtroom. The courtroom, which had been silent, suddenly erupted in commotion. Everyone bewildered that Moon Suk, the symbol of justice in the city, was actually a demon in a gleaming cloak. Finally, Sangpill achieved his long-held dream, using his lawyer's gaze to look directly at the defendant and question whether the evil enemy had incited murder. Sitting in the Supreme Judge's chair, she was being questioned as if she were a guilty party. However, lacking concrete evidence, she refused to answer, and the trial continued. This time, it was lawyer Gohan's turn to sit in the witness chair. He also showed some confidence. He claimed to have previously worked as a legal advisor for Oju, thus understanding the situation. He explained that when the Logan City project was underway, the secretary had collaborated with him to turn the land into her own property. This is why the secretary began approaching Moon Suk, and her name was mentioned in the video. He even presented evidence showing that the Logan City master plan had been altered after being submitted to the authorities. Moon Suk was very pleased with this. Just when she thought she had the upper hand, the courthouse doors opened again. The person who appeared was Oju. He had chosen to face his guilt. He had been a henchman from Moon Suk's father's generation to hers. Moon Suk knew she had been exposed, but she still wanted to disqualify herself as a witness. However, prosecutor Jung prevented her. Sangpill stepped forward to defend her. Innocent people had fallen unjustly on Kisung soil, including his mother. All of them were killed by Oju, but the real mastermind behind him was Moon Suk. If he was a thug, then the person pulling the strings behind him was even more terrifying. Oju even had a recording of a phone call between him and Moon Suk as evidence. Sangpill once again produced photos from 18 years ago, showing Oju helping Moon Suk deal with another judge. Moon Suk tried to claim the photos were fake, but Sangpill steered the conversation towards the question of who the blurred person in the photo was. Oju admitted it was him, and that the person in the car was Moon Suk. She drove her car into someone and then called him to dispose of the body. Moon Suk still maintained that there were no credible witnesses to refute the lawyer's argument. Seeing this, Jae-tung played his trump card. Her mother, the only witness at the time. These photos were also taken by her mother, at great risk. Moon Suk's appearance made her feel more afraid of losing than ever before. Sangpill asked if she still wanted to deny it, but she didn't answer. Ignoring public outrage, she temporarily suspended the trial. Sangpill didn't need to back down anymore. He shouted, demanding she sit back down. The prosecution also pressed forward with charges against the judge, saying she now had no way out. The trial ended. She had truly lost. Her life, built up over many years, collapsed in an instant. Sangpill received news that Oju had escaped while being escorted. He panicked and rushed to the scene. Sangpill wasn't worried about Oju, but rather that they couldn't let him die so easily. The two men clashed in the street. Sangpill wanted to use the law to punish him, but Oju kept provoking him by bringing up his deceased mother. Sangpill lost his temper and snatched the gun from Oju's hand. But having come this far, he couldn't let things end like this. He would follow the path his mother had taken, using the law to punish evil. But evil doesn't just appear out of nowhere. Oju, orphaned from a young age, lived by his fists. He survived by strength. He wasn't taught love, so he lacked compassion and kindness. He only knew how to bow down and work for those who threw him food. He was born on this beach, so he had to die here. Saying this, he snatched the gun and pulled the trigger right there. He ended his life of sin. At the same time, Moon Suk had to shed the cloak she had worn throughout her life of dedication, struggle, and committing many sins. She was a talented woman who built a more impressive career than her father, but she was too cruel, and as a result, she ended up in prison for the rest of her life. Following her, one by one, each member of the 7-person group was handcuffed. This major case finally concluded. But Sangpill couldn't rest easily. He took a letter requesting a reinvestigation of his mother's case to prosecutor Jung, asking him to re-examine it, because the root cause of the major case stemmed from his mother's case. In fact, Sangpill needed a legal apology to his mother, stating that she was murdered, not simply missing. 18 years later, justice, though delayed, would not let the truth be buried in the dust. The film ends here. Goodbye, and see you in the next film.